Hello there, and welcome to Tired Thinker, where ideas slow down and reflection takes its time. Tonight, we're going to explore something invisible, powerful, and quietly transformative: the mental hacks used by history's most powerful people. These are the habits, strategies, and mindsets that helped leaders, innovators, and visionaries shape the world. From ancient emperors to modern icons, you might not see them, but they guided decisions, strengthened focus, and turned ordinary minds into extraordinary ones. Before we dive into their minds, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? And what time is it right now in your little corner of the world? It's curious, isn't it? A video about mental mastery, and here we are, scattered across the globe, quietly connecting over thoughts and strategies that transcend time. If you find this slow exploration of the mind soothing, or if you're just here to rest your thoughts after a long day, I'd be so grateful if you gave the video a like or gently subscribed. It helps this tired little channel reach others who might need a soft moment of reflection too. Now, let's begin. Silence is one of the most powerful tools a leader can use. It may seem like doing nothing, but in the right moment, it can change the course of a conversation, a negotiation, or even history. Abraham Lincoln and Winston Churchill both understood this. They knew that words matter, but the pauses between them matter just as much. When they chose to remain quiet, they sent messages louder than speech. Lincoln was a master of waiting. During tense cabinet meetings, he often sat quietly while others argued. He listened without interrupting, letting his advisors speak freely. This gave him two advantages. First, he gathered information without giving away his own position. Second, his silence made others uneasy. People tend to fill silence with more words, often revealing things they had not planned to say. By the time Lincoln spoke, he had a clear picture of the room. His words carried weight because he did not waste them. His silence was not passive. It was a deliberate act that shaped the outcome of the discussion. Churchill used silence in a different way. As a speaker, he understood that pauses give power to language. In his wartime speeches, he often stopped for several seconds after key phrases. This pause forced his audience to sit with the weight of his words. It also built suspense. People leaned forward, waiting for what came next. By controlling the rhythm of his speech, he controlled the emotions of his listeners. Imagine Churchill saying, "We shall fight on the beaches." Then imagine him stopping. The pause allows the listener to picture the scene and feel its gravity before he continues. Without that pause, the words would still be strong, but they would move past too quickly to sink in fully. In negotiations, silence works like a hidden lever. Picture a business meeting where two sides discuss a contract. One side makes an offer. The other side stays quiet. The silence stretches. The first side begins to wonder if the offer was too low or too high. To break the tension, they might speak again, adding more details or even improving the offer. The silent side has gained ground without saying a word. This tactic works because most people find silence uncomfortable. They rush to fill it, often weakening their own position. Skilled negotiators know this and use silence to draw out information and concessions. Silence also gives leaders time to think. In high-pressure situations, people often speak too quickly and regret their words later. A moment of silence allows space for thought. It prevents rash decisions and careless promises. When a leader pauses before answering, it shows control. It signals that they are considering their response carefully. This builds trust. People believe that a leader who listens and reflects will make better choices than one who reacts impulsively. Consider a team meeting where emotions run high. A manager faces criticism from their staff. Instead of defending themselves right away, the manager stays quiet. This silence allows the team to vent fully. It also shows that the manager values their input enough to hear them out. When the manager finally speaks, their words are more likely to be heard because they did not rush to argue. The team feels respected, and the conflict has a better chance of resolution. In this way, silence can calm a storm without force. Silence does not mean absence. It is active listening. It involves paying close attention to what is said and what is left unsaid. Nonverbal cues play a role. A slight nod, steady eye contact, or a calm posture can all speak volumes without a single word. Leaders who master these silent signals can guide conversations subtly. They can show agreement, challenge, or encouragement without interrupting. This keeps discussions focused and respectful. In daily life, silence can be a sign of strength. Imagine a parent dealing with a child's tantrum. Instead of yelling or giving in, the parent remains calm and quiet. The child eventually runs out of energy and begins to listen. The parent's silence demonstrates control and sets a boundary without escalating the conflict. Leaders face similar situations. When confronted with anger or provocation, staying silent can diffuse tension and prevent mistakes. There are risks to silence if used poorly. A leader who never speaks can seem detached or weak. Timing matters. The key is to balance silence with speech. Silence should create space, not voids. It should serve a purpose, like gathering information, building suspense, or showing respect. If silence becomes avoidance, it loses its power. For instance, in a crisis, a leader must eventually address concerns. Staying silent too long creates fear and confusion. Churchill understood this during World War II. He paused for effect during speeches, but he never left his people without guidance for too long. His silence was measured, never neglectful. Training oneself to use silence well takes practice. It begins with resisting the urge to fill every gap in conversation. Many people feel pressure to respond immediately. By pausing, even for a few seconds, they create space for better responses. In negotiations, this pause can feel uncomfortable at first. Over time, it becomes a natural part of the process. Another way to practice is through listening exercises. Focus on hearing every word someone says without planning a reply. This builds patience and awareness, two key skills for strategic silence. Imagine a modern example in the workplace. A CEO announces a major change, like a merger. Employees react with questions and concerns. Instead of rushing to explain every detail, the CEO listens silently for a few moments. This shows that they take the concerns seriously. When they do speak, their message addresses the actual worries raised rather than assumptions. The silence at the start sets the tone for honest, thoughtful communication. It also prevents the chaos that often follows big announcements. Even in small interactions, silence shapes outcomes. During job interviews, candidates who pause before answering can seem more confident and thoughtful. Interviewers may interpret quick, unfiltered responses as nervousness or lack of depth. A brief silence signals composure. It also gives the candidate time to frame their answer well. In this way, silence can be as persuasive as the words themselves. The power of silence lies in its subtlety. It does not demand attention like loud speech or dramatic gestures. Instead, it works quietly, influencing thoughts and feelings beneath the surface. Leaders who master silence gain an edge. They speak less, but their words carry more weight. They listen more, but they miss nothing. Lincoln and Churchill knew this truth. Their strategic use of silence shaped history, proving that sometimes the most powerful statement is the one left unsaid. Franklin D. Roosevelt understood the value of waiting. In a world where people expect instant answers, he showed that patience could be a form of power. By delaying his responses, he gave himself and others time to think. This simple act helped him make better decisions, avoid costly mistakes, and build trust as a thoughtful leader. His method was not about avoiding decisions. It was about making sure the right decisions were made at the right time. When faced with a difficult problem, most people feel pressure to act immediately. They want to solve it, end the tension, and move forward. This urgency often leads to rash choices. Emotions run high, facts may be incomplete, and the wrong move can create bigger problems. Roosevelt saw this pattern and chose a different path. Instead of reacting on the spot, he paused. He allowed emotions to cool and gave himself room to see the issue from all sides. By doing so, he often discovered new information or a better course of action that was not visible in the heat of the moment. Imagine a heated cabinet meeting during the Great Depression. Advisors argue over how to handle a banking crisis. Some want to close the banks at once. Others warn that closing them will create panic. Everyone looks to Roosevelt for a decision. Instead of choosing immediately, he listens carefully, asks questions, and then ends the meeting without giving an answer. At first, this frustrates his advisors. They want clarity, but while they sleep on it, Roosevelt gathers more data and observes how the situation develops. By the next day, the crisis looks different. His choice, now based on clearer facts and calmer minds, proves wiser than any rushed response could have been. This waiting period is not wasted time. It is part of the decision-making process. Roosevelt also used delayed responses in diplomacy. Negotiations often involve strong emotions, conflicting interests, and hidden motives. If a leader reacts too quickly, they may reveal weakness or lock themselves into a bad position. Roosevelt's patience gave him an edge. Suppose another country made a bold demand during talks. Instead of responding right away, he might stay silent, thank them for their input, and say he would consider it. This pause left the other side uncertain. They might rethink their demand or reveal more about their true goals while waiting for his reply. When Roosevelt finally responded, he had a better understanding of the landscape and could act with precision. This technique works outside politics too. Picture a manager at a company receiving two conflicting reports about a major project. One team insists the launch is ready. Another warns of serious flaws. If the manager makes a decision on the spot, they risk choosing the wrong path. By delaying their response, they can gather more details, speak privately with key people, and maybe even uncover an issue neither team saw. The final decision, made after this pause, is stronger and more informed. The delay does not show weakness. It shows discipline and care. Emotions are a major reason why waiting works. In the heat of a conflict, people are often ruled by anger, fear, or pride. Decisions made in this state rarely hold up well later. Roosevelt knew that time changes how people feel. A plan rejected in anger today might seem reasonable tomorrow after tempers cool. By waiting, he allowed others to move past their strongest emotions, making it easier to reach agreements. This is especially important when dealing with allies, opponents, or even the public. A calm audience is easier to persuade than an angry one. Consider a family setting as an example. A teenager argues with their parent about curfew. Voices rise, and both sides feel stubborn. If the parent lays down a strict rule in the middle of the argument, it might escalate into rebellion. If the parent instead says, "We'll talk about this tomorrow," everyone has a night to calm down. By morning, the conversation is more rational, and a fair solution is easier to find. This mirrors how Roosevelt managed conflicts on a much larger scale. The human dynamics are the same, only the stakes differ. Delaying a response also sends a message. It shows that the decision matters and deserves careful thought. When Roosevelt waited, people saw him as deliberate and wise. They trusted that he was not rushing for political points or personal gain. In today's fast-paced world, where leaders often speak too quickly, a measured pause can stand out as a sign of strength. It tells others that you value accuracy over speed and substance over show. There is a skill to using this technique well. Waiting too long can create confusion or seem like avoidance. The key is to balance patience with clarity. Roosevelt often gave a timeline, even if he did not give an answer. For instance, he might say, "I will consider this and give my decision by Friday." This reassured others that progress was happening, even if they did not yet know the outcome. It also gave him control of the pace, preventing others from forcing him into a rushed choice. In some situations, the delay itself becomes a strategy. Picture a company negotiating a merger. The other side makes an offer and wants an immediate response. Instead, the company's leader says they need time to review. During this pause, the other side grows nervous. They may worry the deal will fall apart and sweeten their offer to secure agreement. By simply waiting, the leader gains leverage without making a single demand. Roosevelt used this kind of silent pressure often, both in domestic policy and foreign affairs. Modern leaders can apply the delayed response technique in their own work. In meetings, instead of answering complex questions right away, they can say they will think it over and return with a decision later. In emails, they can pause before replying to sensitive messages, allowing time for reflection. Even in personal conversations, a thoughtful pause can prevent hurtful words and improve understanding. The principle remains the same. Waiting creates space for better thinking. Roosevelt's approach shows that leadership is not only about action, but also about timing. By waiting, he let events unfold enough to reveal their true shape. He allowed others to show their hands, emotions to cool, and new facts to emerge. His delayed responses were not delays in leadership. They were an essential part of it. In a world that prizes speed, he demonstrated the rare strength of restraint. Through his patience, he earned a reputation for wisdom that endures to this day. First principles thinking is a way of solving problems by stripping them down to their basic truths. It means questioning every assumption and rebuilding ideas from the ground up. Instead of accepting how things are usually done, this approach asks, what do we know for sure? Elon Musk and Leonardo da Vinci are two well-known figures who use this method to create breakthroughs in very different fields. They looked past tradition and found solutions others missed because they were willing to start from zero. Most people reason by analogy. They look at what others have done and make small changes. This is how industries often work. It feels safe because it builds on proven methods, but it also limits innovation. If everyone accepts the same assumptions, progress moves slowly. First principles thinking challenges this by ignoring what is normal and focusing only on facts that can be proven. Once those facts are clear, new possibilities open up. Elon Musk used this mindset when he started SpaceX. Building rockets was known to be expensive. The aerospace industry had long accepted high costs as unavoidable. Companies bought parts from established suppliers and followed traditional processes. Musk asked why rockets had to cost so much. When experts told him that's just the way it is, he was not satisfied. He broke the problem down into its basic components. A rocket is made of materials like aluminum, titanium, copper, and carbon fiber. Musk calculated the cost of these raw materials on the open market. The total was only a fraction of what companies were charging for finished rockets. This revealed a hidden truth. The real expense came from how rockets were built and sold, not the materials themselves. By understanding this, SpaceX could design rockets from scratch using more efficient methods. This shift in thinking allowed them to create reusable rockets and cut launch costs dramatically. Leonardo da Vinci applied first principles long before modern science existed. He studied nature and machines with a curiosity that ignored conventional wisdom. When others repeated old teachings about anatomy or engineering, he went to the source. He dissected bodies to see how muscles and bones worked, rather than relying on ancient texts. He observed birds in flight to understand aerodynamics instead of accepting myths about how wings functioned. By breaking ideas down to their core truths, he created designs centuries ahead of his time, such as early concepts for helicopters, tanks, and bridges. Leonardo did not simply improve on what others had done. He reimagined what was possible by looking at the fundamental laws of nature. Consider a modern example outside science or engineering. Imagine a restaurant struggling with slow service. The owners assume they need to hire more staff because that is the common solution in the industry. But someone using first principles thinking would question this. They would ask, why is the service slow? Maybe the issue is not the number of staff, but the layout of the kitchen. Perhaps servers spend too much time walking between stations. By breaking the problem down to the core truth that meals are delayed because of inefficient movement, the solution becomes clearer. Rearranging the kitchen could solve the problem faster and cheaper than hiring more people. This is how first principles thinking creates unexpected answers. The process begins with identifying assumptions. This step can be uncomfortable because many assumptions feel like facts. For example, people once believed that heavier-than-air flight was impossible. That belief held back aviation until the Wright brothers ignored it and studied the physics of lift and thrust. They focused only on what could be tested. The result was the first successful airplane. In business, similar unspoken rules exist. A company might assume customers will only pay a certain price or that a product must be made a certain way. By challenging these assumptions, new opportunities emerge. Once the assumptions are stripped away, the next step is to examine the fundamental truths. These are statements that cannot be broken down further. In physics, these might be laws like gravity or thermodynamics. In other areas, they might be basic facts about human behavior or material costs. The goal is to reach a level of clarity where each piece of information is certain. From there, new solutions can be built like a structure with a solid foundation. This method is slower at first because it requires deep thinking. But over time, it leads to insights that incremental improvements cannot reach. Take the example of electric cars. Before Tesla, most automakers assumed electric vehicles had to be slow, expensive, and unattractive. These assumptions came from decades of failed attempts. Musk questioned them. He asked, "What do we know for sure?" The truths were simple. Batteries store energy, motors convert that energy into motion, and people want cars that are safe and desirable. By focusing on these basics, Tesla built electric cars that competed with gasoline cars, not as a niche product, but as a superior option. This shift transformed the auto industry. First principles thinking also applies to personal decisions. Imagine someone wants to save money, but believes they must keep certain habits, like eating out every day or owning a large home. These are assumptions about lifestyle. By questioning them, the person might realize their real goal is comfort and connection, not necessarily a specific house or meal. This opens up new ways to meet their needs while spending less. The method works on any scale, from global problems to individual choices. Practicing this approach requires patience and curiosity. It is easy to accept ready-made answers, especially when they come from experts. But even experts can be wrong or limited by tradition. Leonardo da Vinci faced this when his studies contradicted the teachings of his time. He trusted his observations over authority. Elon Musk did the same when aerospace veterans told him his plans would fail. In both cases, evidence mattered more than reputation. This mindset can feel risky because it challenges established systems, yet it is also the source of progress. A helpful way to use first principles thinking is to keep asking why until you reach the core. For instance, if a company's profits are falling, you might ask, why are sales down? The answer might be, because customers are leaving. Then ask, why are they leaving? Perhaps it is due to poor customer service. Keep asking why until you uncover a fundamental issue, like a mismatch between what the company offers and what customers truly value. Solutions built on this root cause are far more effective than surface fixes. First principles thinking takes effort, but it gives clarity in a complex world. By breaking problems down to their simplest truths, it becomes possible to see past assumptions and habits. This approach leads to innovation because it allows people to imagine paths no one else sees. Whether building rockets, sketching machines, or solving everyday challenges, the principle remains the same. Start with what you know for certain, question everything else, and rebuild from the ground up. Napoleon Bonaparte treated the world like a chessboard. To him, politics and war were games of position, timing, and foresight. He did not just think about the move in front of him. He thought about the move after that, and the move after that, always several steps ahead. This way of thinking gave him an edge over opponents who reacted to events as they came. By seeing patterns and planning long-term, he could shape outcomes before others even realized what was happening. In chess, a skilled player never focuses only on the piece they are moving. They look at the entire board. They consider how each piece interacts with the others and how the position might change over time. Napoleon applied this same thinking to armies and nations. When he looked at Europe, he saw not just battles, but alliances, resources, and morale. He knew that a victory on one front could affect the balance of power elsewhere. By moving troops, forming treaties, or even spreading propaganda, he shifted the whole landscape in his favor. His opponents often saw only the immediate fight. Napoleon saw the structure of the game. For example, before the Battle of Austerlitz, Napoleon seemed to weaken his position on purpose. He left one flank exposed, tempting the enemy coalition to attack. They believed they saw a clear advantage and moved in quickly. In reality, Napoleon had planned this trap days in advance. When the enemy forces committed, his hidden reserves struck from another direction, breaking their line and securing a decisive victory. This was not luck. It was a calculated move, like sacrificing a chess piece to gain control of the board. By thinking ahead, he predicted how his opponents would react and used their assumptions against them. This mindset works outside of war. Imagine a business leader entering a competitive market. A reactive leader responds to each challenge as it appears. A rival cuts prices, so they cut prices too. A rival launches a new product, so they rush to launch one as well. They fight battle after battle without a clear plan. A strategic leader, by contrast, studies the whole market like a chessboard. They consider customer needs, supply chains, regulations, and competitor behavior. They might choose to focus on a small niche at first, building strength quietly. While rivals fight each other over short-term gains, the strategic leader prepares a move that changes the entire game, such as acquiring a key supplier or creating a product no one else saw coming. The chessboard perspective also involves anticipating human behavior. In chess, players try to read their opponent's intentions. Napoleon did the same with kings, generals, and ministers. He studied their personalities, fears, and ambitions. He asked himself, if I do this, how will they respond? By predicting reactions, he could plan not just his moves, but theirs as well. This gave him a kind of invisible control. Even when others thought they were acting freely, they were often following a path Napoleon had set for them. Consider a modern scenario in politics. A government faces unrest due to economic problems. Opposition parties are gaining support. A reactive leader might offer quick fixes or harsh crackdowns. A leader with a chessboard mindset sees further. They might allow certain protests to grow while quietly undermining rival factions. They could introduce policies that divide the opposition or redirect public anger toward an external threat. Each action is part of a larger pattern. The immediate effect matters less than the long-term position it creates. By the time others realize what has happened, the leader has already secured power. The chessboard approach also helps in negotiations. Many people treat negotiations like single events. They focus on winning the current deal. A strategic thinker views each negotiation as one move in a longer game. Sometimes it is better to give up something now to gain leverage later. Napoleon often signed treaties he knew he would break when the timing suited him. To his enemies, this seemed like inconsistency. To him, it was part of a broader plan. In business, a company might accept unfavorable terms in an early partnership to build trust and gather information. Later, when the balance shifts, they can renegotiate from a position of strength. Long-term planning requires patience and discipline. It also requires seeing connections others miss. A chess master notices how a move in one corner of the board affects pieces far away. Napoleon understood that political decisions, economic policies, and military campaigns were linked. For example, he used his continental system to weaken Britain by blocking its trade with Europe. This economic move forced Britain to divert resources and shaped the course of the war. Even though the system faced challenges, it showed how Napoleon thought beyond individual battles. He aimed to control the conditions under which his enemies operated, not just defeat them in combat. There are risks to this way of thinking. If a leader focuses only on the long game, they might ignore immediate dangers. Napoleon himself made this mistake in Russia. He envisioned a grand strategy to bring the empire under his control, but he underestimated the short-term challenges of supply lines, weather, and resistance. His army advanced deep into Russian territory, expecting a decisive victory, but instead faced disaster. This shows that even the best strategist must balance foresight with attention to present realities. In chess terms, planning 3 moves ahead is useless if you overlook a threat that will take your king next turn. Practicing the chessboard perspective starts with awareness. Instead of reacting to events, pause and ask, what larger pattern is at play? Identify the key players and their likely goals. Consider how your actions will ripple through the system. For instance, in a corporate setting, a manager might notice that 2 departments are competing for resources. Instead of choosing sides, the manager could design a project that aligns both departments' interests, turning rivalry into cooperation. This move strengthens the entire organization and prevents future conflict. It is similar to positioning pieces in chess to work together rather than in isolation. Another important skill is deception. In chess, a player may make a move that looks weak to lure the opponent into a trap. Napoleon used deception constantly. He spread false information about troop movements, staged retreats, and disguised his true intentions. This forced his enemies to make decisions based on faulty assumptions. In modern terms, a company might release misleading signals about its product plans to confuse competitors. While the rivals focus on responding to fake threats, the real innovation is prepared in secret. Deception must be used carefully, as it can damage trust if revealed. But when applied strategically, it can shift the balance of power. Even in everyday life, the chessboard mindset has value. Imagine someone planning their career. They might see each job as a separate event, taking opportunities as they come. With a strategic view, they think several steps ahead. They consider which skills, relationships, and experiences will position them for the role they ultimately want. They might accept a lower-paying job now because it leads to a network or expertise that opens bigger doors later. Each choice is a move on the board, part of a long-term plan. The essence of the chessboard perspective is vision. It is the ability to see beyond the moment and understand how different forces interact. Napoleon's success came not just from bold actions, but from careful design. He shaped the field before the battle began, making victory more likely. Those who can see several moves ahead, whether in war, business, or personal life, gain control over complex situations. They do not just play the game, they design it. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, faced wars, plagues, political unrest, and betrayal. Yet history remembers him as calm and steady in the midst of chaos. One of his core practices was visualizing the worst-case scenario before it happened. He imagined losses, failures, and hardships in vivid detail. This was not pessimism, it was preparation. By facing fear in his mind first, he reduced its power when real challenges arrived. This method helped him lead with clarity, while others froze in panic. The human mind often reacts to uncertainty with anxiety. When we do not know what will happen, our imagination fills the gap, usually with vague fears. These undefined fears can feel overwhelming because they lack shape. Marcus understood that by naming the fear and exploring it fully, he could control it. When he imagined the worst possible outcome, he saw that even in disaster, life would go on. The pain might be great, but it would be bearable. This process gave him emotional distance. Instead of being ruled by fear, he became its master. Picture a general before a battle. His army is smaller than the enemy's, and his scouts report bad weather ahead. Many leaders would spend the night worrying, pacing the camp, imagining defeat in a fog of dread. Marcus would sit quietly and think through every bad thing that could happen. He would picture his army being surrounded, his supplies cut off, his friends captured or killed. He would let himself feel the weight of these losses. Then he would ask, if this happens, what will I do next? Perhaps he would retreat to higher ground, call for reinforcements, or negotiate peace. By creating a plan for each possible disaster, he replaced vague terror with concrete action. When dawn came, he faced the enemy with a calm mind because he had already fought the battle in his head. This technique works in modern leadership as well. Imagine a CEO preparing to launch a new product. The stakes are high, and investors expect success. Instead of hoping for the best and avoiding thoughts of failure, the CEO uses worst-case scenario planning. She imagines the product failing completely. Customers hate it. Sales collapse. The company's reputation takes a hit. At first, this exercise feels painful. But as she stays with the thought, she begins to see possible responses. Maybe they can recall the product, fix the flaws, and relaunch. Maybe they can shift resources to another division and stabilize cash flow. The fear of failure transforms into a clear set of steps. When the launch day arrives, she feels ready for any outcome. Even if things go wrong, she has already rehearsed her response. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that misfortune is part of life. By expecting hardship, he avoided the shock that paralyzes many leaders. When a problem appeared, he did not waste time asking, "Why me?" He had already accepted that challenges would come. This acceptance freed his energy for solving problems instead of resisting them. In his writings, he told himself to meet each obstacle as an opportunity to practice virtue. If someone lied to him, it was a chance to practice patience. If a plan failed, it was a chance to practice resilience. This mindset turned setbacks into training. Consider a firefighter entering a burning building. Before they go in, they review the worst possibilities. The roof might collapse. The fire might spread faster than expected. A team member might get trapped. These thoughts do not paralyze them. They guide preparation. The firefighter brings extra equipment, rehearses escape routes, and assigns roles carefully. When danger strikes, they act without hesitation because they have already imagined it. Leaders can apply the same logic. By visualizing failure in advance, they create systems and habits that protect them when chaos arrives. Some people avoid worst-case thinking because they fear it will make them anxious. Marcus knew the opposite was true. Suppressed fears grow in the dark. When you bring them into the light, they shrink. For example, a manager might dread giving a tough presentation. The fear lingers in vague form. What if it goes badly? By imagining the worst, the manager sees the exact scenario. Maybe the projector fails. the audience looks bored, and someone asks a question they cannot answer. Once the fear is specific, solutions appear. Bring a backup device. Prepare extra examples to keep interest. Admit honestly when a question is outside your expertise. The unknown becomes manageable. This practice also teaches humility. When Marcus pictured disaster, he remembered how little control humans truly have. A plague might strike, no matter how wise or skilled a ruler is. A storm might destroy ships, armies, or cities. By facing this truth, he avoided arrogance. He focused on what he could control: his choices, his character, his effort. Modern leaders face the same lesson. A CEO cannot control global markets. A coach cannot control a player's injury. By accepting limits, they stop wasting energy on blame or denial. Instead, they direct their energy to what matters most. Worst-case scenario planning does not mean expecting failure at every turn. It means preparing for it while still aiming for success. A pilot trains for engine failure, not because they expect it to happen on every flight, but because preparation saves lives when it does. In the same way, a leader who imagines financial collapse or political upheaval is ready to respond if it happens. This readiness creates calm. Others may panic in crisis, but the prepared leader acts decisively. Marcus Aurelius often wrote that events are neutral. Our judgment makes them good or bad. By rehearsing disasters in his mind, he removed the sting of surprise and judgment. A setback became just another event to handle. Imagine a team facing a tight deadline. The project manager gathers everyone and asks them to list everything that could go wrong. Maybe a key supplier fails to deliver. Maybe a critical team member gets sick. Maybe the client changes requirements at the last minute. Instead of fearing these possibilities, the team plans responses. They identify backup suppliers, cross-train staff, and set clear boundaries with the client. When problems arise, they are ready. The mood shifts from anxiety to quiet confidence. This is the same principle Marcus used on a larger scale to govern an empire. Practicing this technique takes discipline. It is tempting to dwell only on best-case scenarios because they are pleasant to imagine. Worst-case thinking requires courage. It means looking directly at pain, loss, and failure. Marcus believed this courage was essential for leaders. A leader who refuses to face hard truths will crumble when reality strikes. By training the mind to see clearly, even in dark situations, a leader becomes unshakable. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils. It is like armor for the mind. When the blow comes, it hurts less because you expected it. This method also builds trust. Followers feel safer when they see their leader prepared for trouble. A general who calmly explains what will happen if the battle goes badly inspires more confidence than one who insists defeat is impossible. When people know their leader has thought through the worst, they believe the leader can guide them through it. Marcus Aurelius earned loyalty not by promising safety, but by showing strength in uncertainty. His steady presence reassured his people even when circumstances were dire. By imagining disaster in advance, Marcus Aurelius removed fear's grip and gained control over his own reactions. He did not wait for fate to test him. He tested himself first, in the arena of the mind. This practice allowed him to face plagues, invasions, and political betrayals with calm resolve. Modern leaders can use the same approach to navigate crises, knowing that preparation in thought leads to strength in action. Probabilistic thinking is the practice of making decisions by weighing outcomes based on their likelihood rather than relying on gut feelings or emotions. It is a way of seeing the world as a set of possibilities instead of absolutes. Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors in history, uses this approach to choose where to put his money. Benjamin Franklin, a statesman and inventor, also relied on similar thinking when making personal and political choices. By considering probabilities, they both increased their chances of success while reducing the risk of devastating mistakes. Most people prefer certainty. They want to believe that one option is clearly right and the other is clearly wrong. But life rarely works that way. Every decision has unknowns. A business investment might fail even with perfect planning. A political move might backfire because of factors outside anyone's control. Probabilistic thinking accepts this uncertainty and works within it. Instead of asking, will this work or not, it asks, how likely is this to work, and what will I gain or lose if it does or doesn't? This shift changes how decisions are made. Warren Buffett has built his career on this mindset. When he considers buying a company, he does not focus on headlines or market hype. He examines the underlying numbers: profits, debt, growth potential, and management quality. Then he estimates the probability that the company will perform well over time. If the probability of success is high and the price is reasonable, he invests. If the probability is low or the downside risk is too great, he walks away. This keeps him from chasing trends or making emotional bets. For example, during stock market bubbles, many investors buy in because they fear missing out. Buffett resists this impulse. He knows that even if prices are rising now, the probability of a crash increases when valuations are unrealistic. By staying disciplined, he protects his capital and positions himself to buy when others are forced to sell. Benjamin Franklin used probabilistic thinking long before modern statistics. In his writings, he described a method he called moral algebra. When faced with a difficult choice, he would list the pros and cons of each option, then weigh them by importance and likelihood. This allowed him to see not just which side had more points, but which points carried more weight. It is similar to how a gambler might consider the odds of different hands in a card game. Franklin's approach helped him navigate complex political situations, such as negotiating alliances during the American Revolution. By thinking in terms of probabilities, he avoided rash decisions driven by emotion or pride. Consider a simple example. A person is deciding whether to take a new job in another city. If they think only in absolutes, they might feel paralyzed. Either the move is a perfect success or a total failure. Probabilistic thinking breaks the problem down. Perhaps there is a 60% chance the job will be fulfilling, a 30% chance it will be tolerable, and a 10% chance it will be miserable. The person then considers outcomes. If the job goes well, they gain higher income and career growth. If it goes badly, they can return to their old city after a year. By weighing these factors, the decision becomes clearer. Even if success is not guaranteed, the expected value of taking the job may outweigh the risks. This method also applies to everyday choices. Imagine a manager deciding whether to launch a new product. There is uncertainty about customer demand, production costs, and competitor reactions. A purely emotional decision might focus on excitement about the idea or fear of failure. A probabilistic decision maker instead assigns probabilities to different scenarios. There might be a 50% chance of high demand, a 30% chance of moderate demand, and a 20% chance of low demand. They calculate expected revenue and compare it to costs under each scenario. This analysis does not remove uncertainty, but it clarifies the likely range of outcomes. If the numbers show that even in the moderate demand case, the product will break even, the manager can proceed with confidence. If the numbers reveal a high risk of loss, they can pivot or delay the launch. Emotions often interfere with rational judgment. Fear and greed are powerful forces in both business and personal life. Probabilistic thinking acts as a buffer against these emotions. When someone is excited about an opportunity, calculating the odds forces them to slow down and consider the risks. When they are afraid of loss, probabilities can reveal that the danger is smaller than it feels. For example, a person might fear flying because they imagine a crash. But when they look at the actual statistics, they see that the probability of an accident is far lower than the probability of a car accident on the way to the airport. This perspective reduces fear and leads to better choices. In investing, Buffett often talks about the concept of expected value. This is a mathematical way of expressing probabilistic thinking. If there is a 70% chance of gaining $1,000 and a 30% chance of losing $500, the expected value of the decision is $550. Over many decisions, choosing the option with the highest expected value leads to long-term success, even if some individual bets fail. This is how casinos make money. They do not win every hand or spin, but the odds are in their favor overall. Buffett applies the same principle to his portfolio. He knows that not every stock will rise, but by choosing investments with positive expected value, he wins over time. Franklin used a more practical, everyday version of this idea. When debating whether to spend time or money on a project, he considered the likelihood of success and the value of the outcome. If the chances were low and the reward small, he declined. If the chances were moderate but the reward large, he often took the risk. This helped him focus his energy on opportunities with the greatest potential impact. It also kept him from chasing every idea that crossed his path. One challenge of probabilistic thinking is that probabilities are rarely exact. They are estimates based on available information. This means they must be updated as new data arrives. Buffett constantly reviews his assumptions as market conditions change. Franklin revised his plans when he received new reports from allies or enemies. Flexibility is part of the process. A probability is not a promise. It is a guide. Sticking rigidly to an outdated estimate can be as dangerous as ignoring probabilities altogether. Imagine a doctor diagnosing a patient. At first, based on symptoms, there might be a 40% chance of one illness, a 30% chance of another, and a 30% chance of a third. As test results come in, the probabilities shift. The doctor adjusts the treatment plan accordingly. This is probabilistic thinking in action. The doctor never has total certainty, but by constantly updating the odds, they give the patient the best possible care. Leaders can do the same with business strategies, policy decisions, or personal goals. People sometimes resist this approach because it feels cold or overly mathematical. But at its core, probabilistic thinking is about making wiser, more humane choices. By confronting uncertainty honestly, it prevents overconfidence and panic. It allows for preparation instead of surprise. Franklin and Buffett both understood that life is a series of bets. Some pay off, others do not. By carefully weighing the odds and acting accordingly, they stacked the game in their favor. Over time, this steady, thoughtful process led to extraordinary results. Julius Caesar was known for his ability to connect with people, from soldiers in his legions to senators in Rome. He understood that power alone was not enough to lead. People needed to feel understood and valued. One of his subtle tools was mirroring. By reflecting the body language, tone, and rhythm of the person he spoke with, Caesar built trust without them even realizing it. Centuries later, Dale Carnegie taught the same principle in his work on human relations. Though they lived in very different times, both men recognized that people are more open to those who seem like them. Mirroring works because humans are wired to seek connection. When someone behaves in a way that resembles us, we feel safer and more understood. This comes from basic psychology. In a conversation, if two people match their posture and tone, they create a sense of harmony. The effect is mostly unconscious. It bypasses logic and speaks directly to instinct. Caesar used this skill in tense negotiations. When speaking with a proud tribal leader, he might sit the same way, match the leader's hand movements, and speak with a similar pace. The leader would sense common ground, even if their words were in conflict. This subtle alignment reduced resistance and opened the door to agreement. Dale Carnegie taught a more deliberate form of this practice. In his classes, he showed people how to build rapport by paying close attention to others. If someone leans forward while talking, lean forward slightly too. If they speak slowly, slow your own speech. If they use certain words often, repeat those words back naturally in conversation. Carnegie's method was not about tricking people. It was about showing respect and understanding through small, physical signals. When done well, the other person feels heard and valued. When done poorly or too obviously, it can seem fake and have the opposite effect. Consider a simple scenario. A manager meets with an employee who is upset about a project. The employee sits with arms crossed, speaking in a low, tight voice. If the manager sits casually and speaks loudly, the gap between them grows wider. The employee feels unheard and may become defensive. But if the manager mirrors the employee's posture slightly and matches their calm tone, the atmosphere changes. The employee begins to relax. As the conversation progresses, the manager can slowly shift to a more open posture, encouraging the employee to do the same. This creates a bridge from tension to cooperation without a single direct command. Julius Caesar often used mirroring in his military leadership. When addressing his soldiers, he did not speak to them as a distant ruler. He adopted their mannerisms, using simple language and gestures they understood. When they were weary from battle, he let his own posture show weariness. When they were full of energy before a campaign, he matched their vigor. This made his men feel that he shared their struggles and victories. His ability to reflect their mood deepened their loyalty. They followed him not just because of his authority, but because they felt a bond with him. In negotiations, mirroring can be a powerful tool. Imagine two companies discussing a merger. One side is cautious and reserved. Their representatives speak slowly and avoid eye contact. The other side is aggressive and animated. If the aggressive side pushes forward without adjusting, they may overwhelm the cautious group and create mistrust. But if they slow their pace, soften their tone, and mirror the reserved style, the cautious group feels more comfortable. Over time, the two sides can find common ground. This is not about deception. It is about meeting people where they are and creating a shared space for dialogue. Tone of voice plays a major role in mirroring. Caesar understood that how something is said can matter more than the words themselves. A soft tone can calm anger, while a firm tone can create confidence. Carnegie emphasized this in his teachings as well. If someone speaks with excitement, respond with similar energy. If they speak thoughtfully, slow down and match their rhythm. This shows that you are tuned in to their emotional state. People often decide whether to trust someone based on these subtle cues rather than on logic alone. Mirroring also works in group settings. Imagine a leader addressing a team after a failure. If the leader comes in smiling and upbeat, the team may feel dismissed or misunderstood. If the leader enters with a serious expression and speaks quietly at first, they show that they understand the gravity of the situation. As the meeting continues, the leader can gradually lift their tone and energy, guiding the group toward hope and action. This gradual shift helps the team move forward without feeling forced. Caesar used this technique when rallying his troops after setbacks. By starting where they were emotionally, he could lead them to where he needed them to be. There is a fine line between natural mirroring and mimicry. If someone notices that you are copying them exactly, they may feel mocked or manipulated. Caesar and Carnegie both stressed subtlety. The key is to focus on connection rather than performance. Listen closely and let your body respond naturally. Small adjustments are enough to create rapport. For instance, if someone crosses their legs, you do not need to do the same instantly. You might wait a moment and then shift your posture slightly to match the relaxed style. The goal is to reflect, not duplicate. Mirroring can even de-escalate conflict. Picture a heated argument between two people. One is standing, shouting and pointing. The other remains seated and quiet. The mismatch in energy keeps the conflict alive. If the quiet person slowly stands and raises their voice just a little, they meet the other's level. Then, after a brief connection, they begin to lower their voice and sit down. If done carefully, the angry person will follow. This technique works because people instinctively match those around them. By controlling your own actions, you can guide others toward calm behavior. Julius Caesar's use of mirroring extended beyond individuals to entire cultures. When he entered a new territory, he adopted local customs in small ways. He might wear local clothing or use native terms in speeches. This created goodwill and reduced resistance to Roman rule. The people felt that Caesar understood and respected them. Carnegie applied the same principle to personal relationships. Learning a few words in someone's language or showing interest in their hobbies can create a powerful sense of connection. These gestures work because they reflect the other person's identity back to them. Modern leaders can practice mirroring in everyday situations. During a job interview, a candidate who matches the interviewer's tone and energy can create a stronger impression. In sales, a representative who mirrors a client's style builds trust faster than one who relies only on persuasion. Even in friendships, subtle mirroring strengthens bonds. Two friends walking together often match their steps without thinking about it. This natural synchronization is a form of unspoken agreement. The essence of mirroring is empathy in action. It is a way to show understanding without words. Caesar's soldiers felt it when he stood among them, sharing their posture and spirit. Carnegie's students learned it when they connected with others through simple physical signals. Whether in ancient Rome or modern boardrooms, the principle remains the same. People are drawn to those who reflect them. By mastering this subtle skill, leaders can build trust, resolve conflicts, and inspire loyalty. Winston Churchill and Martin Luther King Jr. understood that facts and logic alone rarely move people to action. Numbers can inform, and arguments can persuade, but stories reach the heart. A well-told story creates an image that stays in the mind long after the details fade. It turns abstract ideas into something real and personal. Both men mastered the art of using stories and metaphors to inspire others. Their words rallied nations and changed history, not just because of what they said, but how they said it. Churchill faced one of the darkest moments in modern history. Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany, with invasion looming. Charts and reports could not lift the spirits of a population living under constant threat. Churchill used vivid language to make people feel part of a larger story. When he spoke of fighting on the beaches, the fields, and the streets, he painted a picture of ordinary citizens standing together. The words gave listeners something to hold on to, something they could see in their minds. Instead of just listing military strategies, he told a story of courage and unity. Even those who doubted victory could imagine themselves as characters in that story, fighting for their homes and families. Martin Luther King Jr. also relied on storytelling, but his focus was on justice and equality. In his famous speech about a dream, he did not describe laws or policies in dry terms. He spoke of his children walking hand in hand with others, judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. This image was simple, yet powerful. Anyone could picture it. By framing his vision in human terms, King made it accessible to everyone. whether they were activists, politicians, or ordinary citizens. His metaphors connected to shared values and experiences, making his message universal. Stories work because they create emotional connections. When people hear a story, they do not just process information, they feel it. A leader who tells a story taps into that emotional response. This is why military commanders throughout history have told stories before battle. Caesar spoke to his troops about their past victories to remind them of their strength. Churchill reminded his people of Britain's long history of resilience. King told stories about hardship and hope to inspire peaceful resistance. In each case, the story gave meaning to sacrifice and struggle. Consider a modern example. A CEO announces a new company direction. If they simply present charts and data, employees may nod politely, but feel detached. If instead they tell a story about a customer whose life improved because of the company's product, the message becomes personal. The employees see the impact of their work. They feel connected to the mission. This emotional bond drives motivation far more than numbers alone ever could. Metaphors are another powerful tool. A metaphor takes something complex and makes it simple by comparing it to something familiar. Churchill often used warlike or nautical metaphors. When he described the Nazi threat as a storm gathering on the horizon, people understood the urgency. King used metaphors drawn from everyday life. When he said that justice would roll down like waters, he gave a sense of unstoppable force and natural truth. These images helped listeners grasp ideas that might otherwise seem distant or abstract. Storytelling can also unite diverse groups. During the Civil Rights Movement, King spoke to audiences with very different backgrounds. Some were deeply religious, others were political, and many were ordinary people who simply wanted peace. By telling stories that drew on common human experiences, family, struggle, hope, he built bridges between these groups. Churchill faced a similar challenge in holding together a coalition government during wartime. His speeches had to appeal to both hardened generals and weary civilians. By framing the war as a shared story of survival and honor, he gave everyone a role to play. There is a strategic side to storytelling as well. A well-crafted story can guide how people interpret events. Imagine a company facing layoffs. If leadership announces cuts without context, employees may feel betrayed and fearful. But if the leader explains through a story, describing the company's journey, the challenges faced, and the vision for the future, the same event takes on a different meaning. It becomes part of a larger narrative of survival and growth. The facts do not change, but the emotional impact does. Churchill did this masterfully when announcing bad news. Even in defeat, he framed setbacks as temporary chapters in a story that would end in victory. Tone and delivery matter as much as the story itself. Churchill's speeches were marked by deliberate pauses and careful rhythm. He understood that silence between words could build tension and allow listeners to absorb meaning. King's speeches flowed like music, with repetition and cadence that stirred emotion. Their voices carried the weight of the stories they told. A flat or rushed delivery would have weakened their impact. Modern leaders can learn from this by paying attention not just to what they say, but how they say it. Storytelling is not limited to grand speeches. It works in small settings too. A manager giving feedback to an employee can use a story to make the point clearer. Instead of saying, "You need to improve communication," they might share a brief example of a past project where poor communication caused problems. The story turns abstract advice into a concrete lesson. In negotiations, telling a story about a past partnership can build trust and show credibility. Stories make conversations memorable and persuasive. There is also a caution in this technique. A story must be authentic. If it feels forced or false, it breeds distrust. Churchill and King spoke from lived experience. Their stories carried truth because they reflected real struggles and hopes. A leader who fabricates stories or uses them only to manipulate will eventually be exposed. The power of storytelling lies in sincerity. When a story aligns with actions, it becomes a force for connection and change. Imagine a community facing a natural disaster. Facts about damage and repair costs are necessary, but they do not inspire resilience. A local leader who tells the story of neighbors helping each other, of shared loss and shared rebuilding, gives people a sense of meaning. The story becomes a rallying point. It reminds them that they are part of something larger than their individual hardship. This is the same principle Churchill used during the Blitz, when he spoke of Londoners as a symbol of courage to the entire world. Stories move people because they reflect human experience. Churchill's wartime speeches and King's calls for justice both relied on this truth. They knew that in moments of crisis or change, people need more than facts. They need to see themselves in a narrative. They need metaphors that make sense of chaos. Through storytelling, leaders can shape perception, inspire action, and leave a message that endures long after the words are spoken. Napoleon Bonaparte understood that battles are not fought only with armies. They are also fought with stories. He once said that history is the version of past events that people have decided to agree upon. This statement reveals how much he valued perception. He knew that if people believe a certain version of events, that version becomes reality. A victory on the battlefield can be lost if it is told poorly. A defeat can be softened or even turned into a lesson if framed correctly. Controlling the narrative is as important as controlling territory. Napoleon carefully shaped how others saw him. When he returned from campaigns, he did not simply report what happened. He crafted bulletins that described his actions in ways that built his image as a brilliant and unstoppable leader. These bulletins were read aloud to troops and citizens. Even when the truth was messy or uncertain, the story he told gave people confidence. In this way, he strengthened his authority without firing a shot. His opponents often failed to do the same. They might win a battle but lose public support because they let others tell the story for them. Napoleon understood that silence leaves a void, and someone will always fill it. Consider a campaign where the outcome was unclear. Perhaps Napoleon won in one region but lost in another. Instead of presenting this as mixed news, he focused on the part that served his goals. He highlighted the victory, described it in vivid detail, and downplayed the loss. By the time the public heard about the events, they believed France had achieved progress. This shaped morale and influenced future actions. Soldiers marched into the next battle with renewed belief, and allies saw France as strong. The facts had not changed, but their meaning had. This principle applies far beyond war. In business, companies face setbacks all the time. A product may fail, or a deal may fall through. If the company remains silent, rumors spread and employees lose trust. If leaders speak quickly and clearly, they can guide how people interpret the event. Imagine a tech firm that cancels a product launch. If leaders announce only that the project ended, employees might assume incompetence or financial trouble. If leaders instead explain that they learned from the attempt and are now focusing resources on a more promising product, the same event becomes part of a growth story. The narrative shifts from failure to evolution. Napoleon also used symbols to reinforce his narratives. He understood that images can be more powerful than words. Paintings of him crossing the Alps or leading charges in battle were carefully staged. These images traveled across Europe, shaping how people saw him even if they never met him or read his bulletins. In modern terms, this is like managing a brand. A logo, a photograph, or a single moment captured on video can define perception. Leaders today use social media, advertising, and public appearances to achieve the same effect. The goal is to create a consistent story that aligns with their message. Controlling the narrative is especially important during crises. When events move quickly, people look for explanations. If leaders do not provide one, others will fill the gap. This can lead to confusion or panic. Napoleon was quick to issue statements after battles, even before all details were known. By speaking first, he set the tone. Others might disagree later, but their version would feel like a correction rather than the original truth. In politics, this tactic is still used. The first explanation people hear often becomes the one they remember, even if it is incomplete. There is a psychological reason for this. Humans seek stories that make sense. When something chaotic happens, we want a clear beginning, middle, and end. Leaders who provide that structure gain influence. Napoleon gave his followers a story of France rising against old powers, bringing progress and order. Even when individual battles were messy, this larger narrative made sense. His opponents often failed to offer a competing story. Without one, their actions appeared random or defensive. This left Napoleon's version as the default. Imagine a modern political leader facing an economic downturn. The raw facts might be grim: job losses, falling markets, rising debt. If the leader simply lists these facts, people feel lost. But if the leader frames the downturn as a temporary storm caused by outside forces and promises a plan to rebuild, the same facts take on new meaning. People see themselves as part of a struggle with a clear path forward. This does not erase the hardship, but it gives it purpose. The narrative controls how the hardship is experienced. There is a danger in losing control of the story. If someone else defines events first, it is hard to change their version later. Napoleon worked hard to avoid this. He understood that even small incidents could grow if left unchecked. For example, if a general disobeyed orders and caused a setback, Napoleon acted quickly. He might publicly praise the general's bravery while quietly removing them from command. This prevented the setback from becoming a scandal. By shaping the explanation, he protected both his reputation and the army's morale. In modern organizations, this is similar to addressing internal problems before they spread to the public. Transparency matters, but so does timing and framing. Controlling the narrative is not about lying. Lies may work briefly, but they crumble when exposed. Napoleon mixed truth with selection. He chose which facts to highlight and which to leave in the background. This allowed him to guide perception while staying grounded in reality. A modern example is a company facing a data breach. If it denies the breach, trust collapses when the truth comes out. If it admits the breach, but emphasizes the steps taken to fix it and protect customers, the story becomes one of responsibility rather than failure. The difference lies in how the facts are arranged and presented. Consider a sports team after a crushing loss. The coach could say, "We failed and it was embarrassing." That is one narrative. Or the coach could say, "This game exposed our weaknesses and now we know where to focus our training." Both statements describe the same event. The second builds hope and direction. The first breeds despair. Leaders at every level face this choice. They cannot control what happens, but they can control how it is told. Napoleon's skill with narratives extended beyond his lifetime, even after his fall. The myths he created endured. Stories of his genius and bravery spread across Europe, influencing politics for decades. This shows the lasting power of narrative. Once a story takes hold, it can outlive the person who told it. Modern brands and movements work the same way. A powerful origin story can sustain a company or cause even through hardship. The initial narrative becomes a foundation others build upon. To control a narrative, a leader must first understand their audience. Napoleon knew that his soldiers wanted glory and purpose. His bulletins spoke to those desires. Citizens wanted stability and pride, so his speeches addressed those themes. In business, the audience might be employees, customers, or investors. Each group needs a story that speaks to their concerns. A single event can be framed differently for each audience without losing coherence. The key is consistency in the core message. In every era, those who shape perception hold power. Napoleon grasped this truth and used it as skillfully as he used his armies. By controlling the narrative, he turned facts into meaning and events into history. Leaders today face different tools and faster communication, but the principle remains unchanged. The story people believe determines how they act, and the one who tells that story first often wins. Steve Jobs and Andrew Carnegie understood a simple truth about human behavior. People value what is rare. When something is hard to get, it feels more desirable. This is the scarcity principle. It works because scarcity creates a sense of urgency and importance. If people believe there is only a limited supply, they act faster and value the item more. Jobs used this principle to build excitement around Apple's products. Carnegie used it to shape access to power and opportunity in the business world. Though their methods were different, the core idea was the same. Scarcity is not just about supply, it is about perception. Jobs was a master at using scarcity in product launches. When Apple released a new iPhone, it was never immediately available to everyone. The first batch was limited, and lines formed outside stores. People camped overnight to be among the first to own it. This was not only about demand, it was carefully managed. Jobs understood that seeing others wait in line sent a message. If so many people wanted the product, it must be valuable. By controlling supply, Apple created an atmosphere of exclusivity. Even those who did not care about technology felt the pull of wanting what was rare. The product became more than a phone. It became a symbol of status. Carnegie applied the same principle on a larger scale. During the rise of the steel industry, access to certain business opportunities was limited to a small circle of industrialists. Carnegie did not open his networks freely. Instead, he made connections feel exclusive. If a politician, banker, or competitor wanted to be part of his projects, they had to earn a place. This created a powerful incentive. People worked harder and showed more loyalty because inclusion was scarce. By limiting access, Carnegie increased its value. Those inside the circle felt privileged, while those outside worked to get in. Scarcity also works in ideas and experiences. Jobs did not just sell hardware, he sold moments. When he announced a new product, he created suspense by keeping details secret until the last possible moment. At his famous keynote presentations, he built tension with phrases like "one more thing," revealing surprises only at the end. His secrecy made the audience feel like they were part of something special. Information was scarce, and that scarcity heightened excitement. People did not just buy the product, they bought into the experience of being among the first to know. In today's world, limited editions are common. Companies release products in small batches to create demand. A luxury watchmaker might produce only a few hundred pieces of a model. A clothing brand might collaborate with an artist for a single run of designs. These strategies work because scarcity triggers competition. When customers believe supply is running out, they act quickly. Jobs mastered this psychological effect. Even when Apple had the capacity to produce more devices, he sometimes held back initial shipments to maintain the feeling of rarity. The scarcity was partly real and partly engineered. Carnegie used scarcity not in consumer markets, but in the realm of influence. He understood that exclusive access to leaders and decision-makers creates power. For example, he built relationships with government officials by supporting libraries and public projects. Not everyone received his support, By choosing carefully where to invest his resources, he made his favor valuable. Politicians and communities competed for his attention. This gave him leverage without direct confrontation. He did not need to control every aspect of the steel industry through force. By controlling access to his networks and capital, he influenced outcomes indirectly. Consider a modern example in technology. A startup launches a new social media platform. If anyone can join at any time, growth may be steady but slow. If the company instead uses an invite-only system, demand spikes. People want to join because they cannot. Each invitation becomes a token of status. This was how several major platforms grew in their early stages. The scarcity of access created buzz and a sense of belonging. Jobs understood this dynamic well. He made early Apple products feel like membership cards to an elite club. Owning a Mac in the early days was not just about computing. It signaled creativity and innovation. Scarcity also affects pricing. When something is rare, people are willing to pay more. Carnegie's steel operations benefited from this. During certain projects, he controlled resources that no competitor could match. Because he held a scarce position, he could negotiate higher prices and better terms. Jobs applied a similar tactic with Apple products. Even when competitors offered cheaper devices with similar features, Apple maintained premium pricing. The scarcity of design, brand identity, and user experience justified the higher cost in the eyes of consumers. People believed they were paying for something unique. There is a psychological element to scarcity that goes beyond logic. When people fear missing out, they make decisions quickly. This is why limited time offers and countdowns work so well in marketing. Jobs never relied on gimmicks, but he understood the underlying principle. During a product launch, he let the crowd feel the pressure of limited availability. As people rushed to buy, their excitement spread to others. The frenzy became part of the story, reinforcing the idea that Apple products were worth waiting for. Carnegie used scarcity to manage competition within his own ranks. By making promotions and opportunities rare, he pushed his managers to excel. If only a few positions were available at the top, every candidate worked harder to stand out. This created a self-reinforcing cycle. Those who succeeded felt they had earned something special, while those who failed still respected the process because it seemed fair and exclusive. Carnegie's empire ran on this carefully balanced scarcity. Too much access would have weakened its power. Too little would have caused rebellion. He controlled the flow like a skilled strategist. Scarcity can also be used to change behavior. Imagine a nonprofit seeking donations. If it says, "We accept donations anytime," people may postpone giving. If it says, "We have a matching fund for the next 48 hours," donations surge. The limited window creates urgency. Jobs used similar techniques when introducing products. Early adopters were rewarded with special features or designs that later versions did not include. This made people eager to act quickly, fearing they might miss out. Carnegie did this on a larger scale with business partnerships. When a rare opportunity arose, he offered it to a select few, knowing that scarcity would drive commitment. The danger of scarcity is overuse. If everything is scarce, people stop believing it. Jobs was careful to balance availability. After the initial rush, Apple products became widely accessible. This ensured that the brand remained desirable without frustrating too many customers. Carnegie also understood balance. While he kept certain circles exclusive, he opened libraries and educational programs to the public. This created goodwill and reinforced the value of the exclusive opportunities he controlled. Scarcity works best when it is real and when it contrasts with abundance elsewhere. Scarcity shapes perception. When something is hard to get, people assign it meaning. Jobs made technology feel like art by limiting access and crafting a narrative of exclusivity. Carnegie turned industrial power into social influence by controlling who could join his inner circle. In both cases, scarcity was not just about numbers. It was about how people felt. The desire for what is rare is deeply human. Leaders who understand this can guide behavior, create loyalty, and turn ordinary products or opportunities into symbols of value. Mahatma Gandhi understood that big movements do not begin with massive leaps. They grow step by step through small actions that build trust and momentum. This approach aligns with what psychologists now call the foot-in-the-door technique. It works by asking people for a small, manageable commitment first. Once they agree, they are more likely to accept larger commitments later. Gandhi used this method to mobilize millions without overwhelming them. His strategy was rooted in patience and consistency, and it allowed him to guide people from quiet agreement to bold action. When Gandhi began his campaigns in India, he did not start by asking the population to rise up against the British Empire all at once. That would have been too frightening and risky. Instead, he focused on small, symbolic acts of resistance. These acts were simple enough for people to say yes to without much hesitation. For example, he encouraged people to spin their own cloth instead of buying British textiles. This act seemed minor, but it carried a deeper message of self-reliance and economic independence. By participating, people felt they were making a difference without putting themselves in immediate danger. Over time, this simple habit built a shared identity and prepared them for larger sacrifices. The foot-in-the-door technique works because of human psychology. When someone agrees to a small request, they begin to see themselves as the kind of person who supports that cause. Later, when they are asked to do something bigger, they want to stay consistent with their earlier actions. Gandhi understood this dynamic long before it was formally studied. He gave people a way to take a first step that was easy and safe. Once they took that step, they were more open to taking another, and then another. A movement grew like a chain reaction, each link connected to the last. Consider how this worked during the Salt March of 1930. Gandhi did not start by demanding that millions of Indians storm government buildings or refuse all British taxes. Instead, he focused on a single law that required Indians to buy salt from the British government. He announced that he would walk 240 miles to the sea to make salt himself, breaking the law in a peaceful protest. At first, only a small group joined him. The act was simple: walking and collecting salt. But it carried deep symbolic weight. As Gandhi and his followers marched, more people joined. By the time they reached the coast, tens of thousands were involved. The initial small act opened the door to massive civil disobedience. It began with something anyone could do and grew into something powerful. This strategy is visible in everyday life as well. Imagine a charity trying to recruit volunteers. If they ask someone to donate an entire weekend to a big event, many people will say no. It feels like too much. But if they first ask the person to sign a petition or share a message on social media, the request feels easy. Once the person has taken that small action, they are more likely to agree to a slightly larger one, like attending a short meeting. Eventually, they may be ready to commit to the full weekend. The key is that each step builds on the last, creating a sense of progress and identity. Gandhi used this approach not only with individuals, but with entire communities. In villages across India, he introduced local projects like cleaning wells, improving sanitation, or teaching basic literacy. These were small, practical efforts that addressed immediate needs. They also built trust between Gandhi and the villagers. As people saw results from these small actions, they became more willing to join larger campaigns for independence. Gandhi knew that trust cannot be demanded. It must be earned through consistent behavior over time. Each small victory laid the foundation for the next. There is a powerful lesson here about leadership. Many leaders make the mistake of demanding too much too soon. They announce sweeping plans or radical changes without first building a base of small commitments. This often leads to resistance or failure. Gandhi avoided this by breaking down his vision into manageable pieces. For example, before calling for a nationwide boycott, he asked specific groups to boycott certain products or institutions. These targeted actions were easier to organize and less intimidating for participants. Once people experienced success at this level, they felt ready to tackle bigger challenges. The foot-in-the-door technique also works because it respects human limits. Change is difficult. When people face a huge demand, they feel overwhelmed and shut down. A smaller request, however, feels doable. It gives them a chance to act without fear. Over time, these small actions create habits. Gandhi understood that lasting change depends on habits, not just one-time events. By encouraging people to take small, repeated steps, he built a movement that could sustain itself over years. Imagine a modern example in a company. A manager wants employees to adopt a new software system. If the manager demands that everyone switch immediately, confusion and pushback are likely. If instead, the manager starts by asking employees to try one simple feature for a week, they are more likely to agree. Once they see the benefit, the manager can introduce another feature and then another. Over time, the team transitions smoothly. This mirrors how Gandhi guided millions through gradual, steady action. Gandhi's use of this technique also revealed his deep understanding of human dignity. He never forced people to act. Instead, he invited them to join through small, voluntary steps. This gave individuals a sense of agency. They were not just following orders. They were choosing to participate. This choice strengthened their commitment. When the time came for larger acts of resistance, participants felt ownership of the movement. They were not simply part of a crowd. They were active partners in change. Another example of Gandhi's method can be seen in how he handled conflicts within the movement. When some followers wanted to take aggressive or violent actions, Gandhi redirected their energy into smaller, peaceful tasks. He knew that jumping too quickly to extreme measures could destroy the movement's moral authority. By offering manageable alternatives, he kept the group united and disciplined. Each small step reinforced the principle of nonviolence, while still allowing people to feel they were contributing. The foot-in-the-door technique is also visible in modern social movements. A group advocating for environmental change might start by asking people to bring reusable bags to the store. Once this habit takes root, they might encourage recycling or reducing energy use. Later, they can call for more significant actions, like voting for policies or participating in protests. Each stage builds on the last. Gandhi pioneered this model on a massive scale, using simple acts like spinning cloth or collecting salt to prepare millions for the final goal of independence. Gandhi's brilliance lay in his ability to see the path from small beginnings to great outcomes. He understood that a single step, repeated many times by many people, can move an entire nation. The foot-in-the-door technique gave him a practical way to turn abstract ideals into concrete action. By starting with small requests, he reduced fear and built trust. By building on those requests over time, he guided ordinary individuals to extraordinary levels of commitment. His movement grew not through sudden leaps, but through steady, deliberate progress, proving that the greatest revolutions often begin with the smallest acts. John F. Kennedy understood the power of making a promise in public. When a leader states a goal in front of others, it creates pressure to follow through. It also inspires people to rally around the vision. This is the essence of the public commitment strategy. By speaking openly about a bold objective, a leader locks themselves in. Failure becomes visible to everyone, so the only way forward is to take action. Kennedy used this approach masterfully, most famously with his promise to send a man to the moon and return him safely to Earth before the decade ended. At the time he made this pledge in 1961, the United States was behind the Soviet Union in the space race. The Soviets had already launched the first satellite and the first human into orbit. America's space program was still in its early stages, with a string of failures and public doubts. Kennedy could have chosen to keep his plans quiet until progress was certain. Instead, he went before Congress and the nation and announced the goal in clear, direct terms. By doing so, he forced the government, NASA, and the public to focus on making it happen. His words turned a technical challenge into a shared national mission. The psychology behind public commitments is straightforward. People want to appear consistent. When someone says they will do something in front of others, they feel a strong drive to honor that promise. Breaking it would not only bring personal disappointment, but also public embarrassment. This pressure can be a powerful motivator. Kennedy raised the stakes by making his moon pledge not just to his administration, but to the entire world. The goal became a measure of American credibility. Each step of the program was watched closely by allies and rivals. Cost of failure grew higher with every speech and headline. Public commitments also mobilize resources. Before Kennedy's announcement, space exploration was seen as one program among many. It lacked urgency. After the speech, Congress approved massive funding. Engineers, scientists, and contractors understood they were part of something historic. The clear public goal gave them direction. Without it, their work might have remained scattered and underfunded. Kennedy's words aligned countless efforts toward a single purpose. By stating the destination out loud, he created a map that everyone could follow. This strategy works beyond politics. Consider a business leader who wants to launch a new product line. If they tell only a small group of executives, the project may drag on without focus. If they announce the launch date publicly at a company-wide meeting, everyone knows the target. Departments coordinate, deadlines tighten, and progress accelerates. The public promise creates accountability. Employees feel part of a shared mission, much like the American public did during the space race. There is another layer to Kennedy's success. His commitment was not only practical, but also emotional. He framed the moon landing as a symbol of human achievement and national pride. In his famous speech at Rice University, he said, "We choose to go to the moon." The wording mattered. It was not just a government project. It was a collective decision by the American people. He compared the effort to climbing a mountain simply because it was there. This narrative inspired excitement and purpose. By tying the goal to values like courage and exploration, Kennedy turned a technical challenge into a story people wanted to be part of. Public commitments can also be used on a smaller scale. Imagine someone trying to lose weight. If they keep their goal private, it is easy to skip workouts or give in to bad habits. If they announce their plan to friends or post updates online, they create social pressure. Others will notice if they fail. This extra accountability increases the chances of success. The same principle applies to teams. A group that shares its milestones publicly is more likely to meet them than one that keeps plans hidden. Kennedy's Moon Pledge also shows how public commitments can influence competitors. The Soviet Union could not ignore his words. They understood that America had declared a clear target and would pour resources into reaching it. This shifted the dynamics of the space race. Even before a single rocket launched, the public commitment changed global strategy. It signaled determination and set expectations. In negotiations, This can be a powerful tool. A company that announces a bold expansion plan forces rivals to respond. The public statement shapes the competitive landscape. There are risks to this approach. If the goal is unrealistic, failure becomes visible and damaging. A broken promise can harm credibility. Kennedy understood this and chose his words carefully. He set a deadline that was ambitious but possible. The end of the decade gave engineers enough time to solve problems while still creating urgency. Leaders using this strategy must strike the same balance. A vague or distant goal lacks impact. An impossible goal sets up public embarrassment. The art lies in choosing a target that stretches the organization without breaking it. Public commitments also require follow-through. Words alone are not enough. Kennedy backed his promise with action. He secured funding, appointed capable leaders, and supported NASA through setbacks. When early missions failed, he did not retreat. He spoke openly about the challenges while reinforcing the vision. This consistency built trust. People believed in the goal because they saw steady progress toward it. Without visible steps, a public promise can feel hollow and manipulative. The moon landing itself became proof of the strategy's power. In 1969, when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface, it was not just a scientific victory. It was the fulfillment of a promise made 8 years earlier. The entire world watched as the United States delivered on Kennedy's words. The moment strengthened national pride and demonstrated the effectiveness of public commitment. It showed that declaring a bold vision can transform ambition into reality. This approach can also unite divided groups. At the time of Kennedy's speech, America faced internal conflicts over civil rights, economics, and foreign policy. The space program gave people a common purpose. Even those who disagreed on other issues could take pride in the goal. In workplaces or communities, a shared public commitment can have the same effect. It creates a sense of belonging and focus. People put aside differences to work toward a collective achievement. Consider a modern scenario. A startup founder wants to raise awareness for a new app. If they quietly work on improvements, progress may be slow. If they publicly announce that the app will reach 1 million users within a year, they create urgency. Investors, employees, and customers now share the goal. The public statement drives marketing efforts and sharpens decision-making. Success or failure will be clear to everyone, just as the world saw the moon landing as a clear measure of success. Public commitments are powerful because they combine psychology, storytelling, and strategy. They create accountability by exposing goals to outside scrutiny. They inspire action by framing challenges as meaningful. Kennedy's Moon Pledge remains one of the best examples. It showed how a leader's words can shape the future. By declaring a vision publicly, he transformed a struggling space program into a national triumph. His promise was not just a speech, it was a tool that mobilized an entire country and captured the imagination of the world. Marcus Aurelius and Seneca understood that the first reaction is rarely the best one. As Stoic philosophers, they practiced the art of pausing before responding to events. This pause was not about hesitation or weakness. It was a deliberate moment to step back, examine the situation, and choose a response instead of letting emotions take control. In leadership, this skill is essential. A leader who reacts without thought can make mistakes, damage trust, or be manipulated by others. A leader who pauses first gains clarity and strength. Marcus Aurelius ruled during a time of war, plague, and political unrest. Each day brought news that could have provoked anger or fear. He trained himself to take a breath before acting. When a general brought bad news from the front, Marcus did not shout or punish on the spot. He listened. He allowed himself to feel the initial surge of emotion, then let it settle. Only then did he decide what to say or do. This pause gave him control over himself. which in turn gave him control over the situation. By not reacting immediately, he avoided escalating problems and preserved his authority. Seneca taught the same principle through his writings and advice. He believed that people are easily swayed by passion. When someone insults us, our first instinct might be to lash out. When an opportunity arises, we may rush forward without checking for hidden dangers. The pause creates space between stimulus and response. In that space, reason has a chance to speak. Seneca compared this to a soldier holding position instead of charging blindly into battle. By waiting a moment, the soldier sees the enemy's trap and avoids destruction. Leaders face similar traps in politics, business, and personal relationships. Those who act too quickly often fall into them. Consider a modern example. A manager receives an angry email from a client late at night. The message is harsh and unfair. The manager's first impulse is to reply immediately, defending their team and pointing out the client's mistakes. If they act on this impulse, the conflict will likely grow worse. Instead, they pause. They close the email and wait until the next morning. When they return to it, their emotions have cooled. They can now craft a calm, professional response that addresses the problem without hostility. The pause prevents a small issue from turning into a major dispute. The Stoic pause also protects against manipulation. Some people deliberately try to provoke strong reactions. In negotiations, an opponent might insult or pressure you, hoping you will lose your composure and make a poor decision. If you pause, you deny them that power. Marcus Aurelius faced this in the Roman court. Senators and rivals sometimes spread rumors or made accusations to test him. By not reacting immediately, Marcus signaled that he could not be easily moved. His silence forced others to reveal more of their intentions while he gathered information. When he finally spoke, his words carried greater weight because they were measured and deliberate. In everyday life, this principle applies to personal conflicts as well. Imagine a heated argument between two family members. Each time one person speaks, the other interrupts and escalates. The fight spirals out of control. If one person simply pauses before replying, the pattern breaks. The pause creates a moment of calm. It gives them time to choose words that de-escalate rather than inflame. Over time, this habit can transform relationships. Marcus and Seneca taught that the true test of strength is not in overpowering others, but in mastering oneself. The pause is especially useful in leadership when decisions have far-reaching consequences. During a crisis, everyone looks to the leader for direction. If the leader reacts instantly, based on fear or pressure, they may choose poorly. By taking a moment to pause, even a brief one, they signal stability. Their calm presence reassures others. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal that leaders must be like a rock against which waves crash but cannot move. The pause is that still point amid chaos. Consider a CEO facing sudden bad news, such as a major product failure. The board demands answers, the media calls for statements, and employees panic. A reactive leader might rush to assign blame or make promises they cannot keep. A Stoic leader pauses. They gather facts, they ask questions. Even a short delay allows them to separate truth from rumor. When they finally address the public, their message is clear and composed. This builds trust rather than eroding it. The pause does not have to be long. Sometimes a single breath is enough. Seneca advised counting to 3 before responding in anger. This brief delay interrupts the automatic chain of reaction. It gives reason a chance to catch up. Over time, this becomes a habit. A leader who practices small pauses daily will be better prepared for larger challenges, just as a soldier trains with small drills before facing real combat. The mind strengthens through repeated, simple exercises. The Stoic pause also encourages reflection. When Marcus wrote in his journal each night, He reviewed the day's events with a calm mind. By looking back, he could see where he had reacted too quickly or where he had succeeded in pausing. This practice built self-awareness. Modern leaders can do the same through journaling or quiet reflection. By examining past decisions, they improve future ones. Reflection turns the pause from a simple tactic into a way of life. There is a practical benefit as well. Many problems resolve themselves if given a little time. By pausing, a leader may find that a crisis shrinks or disappears without direct action. Marcus Aurelius noted that most of what angers us is temporary. A harsh remark fades, a rumor dies out, a minor setback corrects itself. Acting too soon can make these small issues worse. Waiting allows nature and circumstance to play their part. In negotiations or strategy, the pause can also be used as a tool. Silence makes others uncomfortable. When a leader pauses after hearing a proposal, the other side often fills the silence by revealing more information. Marcus used this tactic with generals and diplomats. By saying nothing, he learned their true positions without asking direct questions. Modern negotiators use the same technique. A well-timed pause can be more powerful than any argument. The Stoic pause is not avoidance. It is not about refusing to act. Marcus Aurelius led armies and governed an empire. Seneca advised rulers and managed vast responsibilities. Both men made decisions and took action. The difference was that their actions were deliberate, not impulsive. The pause gave them a moment to align their behavior with their values. In that space, they chose reason over passion. Imagine a firefighter arriving at a burning building. Their training tells them to pause for a split second before entering. In that moment, they assess the structure, wind direction, and potential hazards. Acting instantly could lead to death. Acting after a brief pause saves lives. Leaders face similar dangers, though less visible. The first move may seem obvious, but without reflection, it can lead to greater harm. The Stoic pause gives them time to see clearly and act wisely. Marcus Aurelius and Seneca left a legacy of calm strength through their writings and actions. They proved that control over the self is the foundation of control over others. The pause they practiced is simple but profound. In the space between stimulus and response lies the freedom to choose. Leaders who master this skill gain resilience and clarity. They are not pushed by anger, fear, or manipulation. They move when they decide, not when others demand. In this way, the Stoic pause remains a timeless tool for leadership and life. Queen Elizabeth I ruled during a time of deep political tension. England faced threats from foreign powers, religious divisions at home, and rival factions within her own court. Every decision she made carried enormous consequences. A wrong move could lead to rebellion, invasion, or her own death. To survive and lead effectively, Elizabeth mastered emotional detachment. She learned to set aside personal feelings when making decisions, focusing instead on rational strategy and long-term stability. This skill allowed her to navigate treacherous waters where others might have been consumed by anger, fear, or pride. Elizabeth grew up surrounded by danger. As a child, she witnessed the downfall of her mother, Anne Boleyn, who was executed on charges of treason. She saw how quickly favor at court could turn to disaster. Later, she was imprisoned by her half-sister, Mary I, on suspicion of plotting against the crown. These early experiences taught Elizabeth a hard lesson. In politics, emotions could not be trusted. Personal attachments could be used against her, and rash actions driven by anger or love could destroy her. By the time she became queen, she had learned to control her outward reactions and keep her true feelings private. One of Elizabeth's greatest challenges was balancing religious conflict. England was split between Catholics and Protestants. Each group wanted her to favor their side completely. A ruler who chose one religion too strongly risked civil war. Instead of acting on personal belief, Elizabeth took a calculated middle path. She established the Church of England with moderate reforms that left room for both groups to coexist. This decision required emotional detachment. As a Protestant, she may have preferred stricter measures, but she recognized that stability was more important than personal conviction. By separating her private faith from her public role, she prevented her country from tearing itself apart. Elizabeth also demonstrated detachment in matters of love and marriage. Many rulers of her time married for political alliances. Elizabeth received numerous proposals from powerful foreign princes and English nobles. Some of these men likely stirred her personal feelings, but she understood that marriage would limit her independence. A foreign husband might pull England into unwanted wars. An English husband might divide her court by favoring certain factions. By remaining unmarried, Elizabeth kept control of her throne and her policies. She even used her single status as a diplomatic tool, hinting at possible marriages to gain leverage in negotiations, then withdrawing when it suited her strategy. This required discipline. She had to resist both personal desire and external pressure to act. One famous example of Elizabeth's emotional control was her handling of Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary was her cousin and a rival claimant to the English throne. Many Catholic nobles saw Mary as the rightful queen and plotted to replace Elizabeth with her. When Mary fled to England seeking refuge, Elizabeth faced a dilemma. Personally, she may have felt sympathy for Mary as a fellow queen. Politically, Mary was a threat. Elizabeth chose to keep Mary under house arrest for nearly 20 years. She avoided executing her for as long as possible, knowing that such an act could inflame tensions with Catholic powers like Spain and France. When undeniable evidence emerged of Mary's involvement in plots to assassinate her, Elizabeth finally approved the execution. Even then, she delayed the decision, showing how carefully she weighed the risks. It was not personal revenge. It was a cold calculation to protect her realm. Emotional detachment does not mean a lack of feeling. Elizabeth felt deeply, but she kept her emotions separate from her decisions. This is similar to a modern leader who must lay off employees to save a company. The choice is painful, but they focus on the greater good. If they let guilt or anger dictate their actions, they might make choices that harm everyone in the long run. Elizabeth understood that a ruler's personal feelings must never outweigh the needs of the state. Consider a scenario in modern politics. A president faces a foreign leader who has insulted their country publicly. The emotional response might be to retaliate immediately with harsh words or actions. A detached leader pauses and considers the broader strategy. Perhaps silence will make the insult fade, or a quiet negotiation behind the scenes will resolve the conflict without escalation. The same principle guided Elizabeth. When foreign ambassadors provoked her, she often responded with charm and measured words, even if she was privately furious. Her calm demeanor kept England from being dragged into unnecessary wars. Elizabeth's detachment extended to her public image. She carefully managed how she was seen by her subjects and foreign rulers. She wore elaborate clothing and used symbols of power to project strength. At the same time, she gave speeches that stirred loyalty and pride. She understood that appearances mattered as much as policies. Even when she felt uncertain or afraid, she presented herself as confident and unshaken. This outward control inspired trust in her leadership. During the threat of the Spanish Armada, she famously addressed her troops at Tilbury, declaring that though she had the body of a weak and feeble woman, she had the heart and stomach of a king. Her words calmed fears and united her people, even as she privately worried about the outcome of the coming battle. The ability to detach emotionally also protected Elizabeth from manipulation. Courtiers at her palace constantly schemed for influence. They flattered, gossiped, and tried to play on her sympathies. By keeping her feelings private, Elizabeth denied them easy leverage. She listened to advice, but rarely revealed her full intentions. Even her closest advisors sometimes did not know what she truly thought. This gave her freedom to act without being trapped by others' expectations. In modern terms, this is like a CEO who hears competing proposals from executives but does not let personal friendships sway their final decision. Elizabeth's reign was full of crises. She faced plots, invasions, and betrayals. Each moment demanded calm judgment. If she had acted on impulse, she might have made fatal errors. Instead, she practiced restraint. After the defeat of the Spanish Armada, for example, she celebrated the victory publicly, but did not allow triumph to cloud her thinking. She knew Spain remained a powerful enemy and that England's resources were limited. Her strategy focused on maintaining balance rather than chasing glory. This long-term perspective required her to set aside personal pride and focus on practical realities. Emotional detachment is difficult because it goes against natural human impulses. When threatened, people want to strike back. When praised, they want to relax their guard. Elizabeth trained herself to resist these swings. She treated flattery and criticism with equal caution. By doing so, she remained steady while those around her rose and fell. This steadiness gave her an advantage. Rivals who acted on passion revealed their weaknesses, while she kept hers hidden. Modern leaders can apply the same principle. A company facing a public relations crisis might feel pressure to respond emotionally to angry customers. A detached approach focuses on facts, solutions, and long-term trust. In personal life, someone dealing with conflict might pause and consider strategy instead of lashing out. Elizabeth's example shows that detachment is not coldness, it is strength. It allows a person to see clearly when others are blinded by emotion. Queen Elizabeth I ruled for 45 years, guiding England through one of its most unstable periods. Her ability to separate personal feelings from state decisions was central to her success. By staying calm amid chaos, she avoided traps and steered her country towards stability. Her reign proves that emotional detachment is not about suppressing humanity. It is about mastering it, using reason as the guide when the stakes are highest. Barack Obama and Benjamin Franklin lived in different centuries, yet both understood the power of daily rituals. They relied on strict routines to conserve mental energy, reduce stress, and focus on the tasks that mattered most. A well-designed routine acts like a framework. It removes small, repetitive decisions, leaving the mind free for complex challenges. Leaders who face constant demands cannot afford to waste energy on trivial choices. By turning certain behaviors into habits, they protect their attention for the decisions that shape history. During his presidency, Obama followed a consistent morning ritual. He woke at the same time each day, exercised, and ate a simple breakfast. Even his clothing choices were part of the routine. He often wore the same style of suit in either gray or blue. When asked why, he explained that he wanted to reduce decision fatigue. Each choice, no matter how small, takes mental effort. If he spent energy on what to wear, it left less for national security briefings, negotiations, and crisis management. By simplifying the small things, he preserved focus for matters of state. His ritual was not about rigidity for its own sake. It was a practical tool to stay sharp under pressure. Benjamin Franklin took a similar approach, though his routine looked different. Franklin believed that structure brought freedom. He designed his days carefully, writing out schedules that balanced work, study, and reflection. Each morning, he began by asking himself a guiding question: what good shall I do this day? This set his intention before the chaos of daily life began. He divided his time into blocks, dedicating certain hours to writing, invention, or public service. In the evening, he reviewed his actions and asked, "What good have I done today?" This ritual of planning and review kept him focused on his larger goals. Without it, he risked being pulled in too many directions by distractions and demands. Both men understood that rituals are more than schedules. They are symbols. Repeating the same actions each day signals to the mind that it is time to enter a certain state. For Obama, putting on his suit and starting his morning routine meant stepping into the role of president. For Franklin, sitting down at his desk during his scheduled work hours meant it was time to create and solve problems. These cues reduce resistance. Instead of debating whether to start a task, the body and mind move automatically into action. Over time, this consistency builds momentum. Consider how this works in modern life. A person who struggles to focus at work might design a simple ritual. Each morning, they drink a cup of tea, review their to-do list, and spend 10 minutes organizing their workspace. These small actions signal the start of the workday. After a few weeks, the routine becomes automatic. The mind associates the tea, the list, and the tidy desk with concentration. This removes the need for willpower. The ritual does the work of preparing the mind to engage deeply. Rituals also reduce stress in high-stakes situations. When everything feels uncertain, familiar habits provide stability. Obama faced crises ranging from economic collapse to international conflict. By keeping his personal routine steady, he created a sense of control amid chaos. Even on the most difficult days, he could rely on his morning exercise and simple breakfast. These constants grounded him. Franklin used rituals in a similar way. His nightly review helped him process successes and failures. By reflecting consistently, he avoided being overwhelmed by guilt or pride. The ritual gave him perspective and kept his emotions balanced. In leadership, rituals can also serve teams. A consistent meeting schedule, a clear agenda, or a shared opening practice can align groups and reduce confusion. For example, a military unit begins each day with the same inspection and briefing. These rituals create discipline and shared purpose. Franklin applied this idea in his civic projects. When he organized community efforts like building libraries or fire brigades, he established regular routines for meetings and responsibilities. This structure allowed groups to function smoothly without constant supervision. There is a biological reason why rituals are effective. The brain has limited capacity for decision-making each day. Each choice, even minor ones, consumes mental resources. This is why people often feel drained after a day of constant decisions. Rituals bypass this problem by turning repeated actions into habits. Once something becomes a habit, it no longer requires conscious thought. Obama's choice to wear the same type of suit is a simple example. By removing that small daily decision, he saved energy for far more important judgments. Imagine a leader without rituals. Their day begins with random choices: what to wear, when to check emails, how to start tasks. Each decision requires effort. By mid-morning, they feel scattered and tired before they even face major challenges. Now imagine the same leader with a clear routine. They follow a set pattern from waking to starting work. Their mind stays fresh because it is not cluttered with trivial decisions. This difference can be the line between effectiveness and burnout. Franklin's routines also demonstrate how rituals can include reflection. Many leaders focus only on planning forward, but looking back is equally important. By reviewing his day each evening, Franklin identified patterns of behavior. He could see where he used his time well and where he fell short. This awareness allowed him to make adjustments without harsh self-judgment. Modern leaders can adopt similar practices. A simple end-of-day ritual, like writing down 3 wins and 3 lessons, builds continuous improvement over time. Rituals are especially powerful during transitions. Moving from one role to another, such as from family life to work, or from strategy to execution, can create friction. A ritual smooths the shift. Obama's morning routine marked the transition from private citizen to public leader each day. Franklin's questions in the morning and evening framed his shift between planning and reflection. These rituals created boundaries that protected their focus. Without them, the demands of leadership might have bled into every moment, leading to exhaustion. Even creative work benefits from ritual. Some people believe inspiration must strike spontaneously, but Franklin knew that structure nurtures creativity. By showing up at the same time each day, he trained his mind to be ready for inventive thinking. Obama applied this principle to decision-making. By handling routine tasks the same way each day, he freed space for creative problem-solving in policy and strategy. Rituals do not stifle innovation. They make it possible by clearing away mental clutter. There is also a social dimension to rituals. When others see a leader following a consistent routine, it signals discipline and reliability. Obama's visible habits, like regular exercise, communicated that he valued health and preparation. Franklin's public routines, like his scheduled meetings and civic projects, showed that he respected order and accountability. These signals build trust. People are more likely to follow a leader whose actions are steady and predictable. Modern technology adds challenges to maintaining rituals. Constant notifications and shifting schedules can disrupt focus. This makes rituals even more valuable today. A leader who begins the day by checking their phone may be pulled in dozens of directions before they even start their planned work. A leader with a protected morning ritual stays in control. They decide how to engage with the world instead of reacting to it. Both Obama and Franklin demonstrate that rituals are not about perfection. There were surely days when their plans were disrupted by emergencies or travel. What mattered was their return to the routine. Like a well-worn path, the ritual was always there to guide them back to balance. Over time, these small, repeated actions shaped their ability to lead. By conserving mental energy and maintaining focus, they achieved clarity amid complexity. Their lives show that rituals are not just personal habits. They are tools of leadership, shaping how decisions are made and how challenges are faced. Thomas Edison approached problems differently than most people. Where others saw failure, he saw information. When one of his ideas did not work, he did not call it a defeat. He called it an experiment. This mental shift allowed him to keep moving forward when others would have stopped. Edison's view of failure as a natural and useful part of the process helped him create some of the most important inventions in history. He reframed problems so that each setback became a stepping stone rather than a dead end. Edison's most famous invention, the electric light bulb, required thousands of attempts before he found the right design. Many people would have given up after a few failures. Edison did not. Each time a filament burned out or a design failed, he studied the result. Instead of saying, "This didn't work," he said, "Now I know one more way it won't work." To him, every test produced valuable data. Even a negative result taught him something new. By reframing the problem in this way, he turned frustration into progress. His persistence was not blind stubbornness. It was grounded in a clear understanding that discovery comes through trial and error. This mindset is powerful because it changes how the brain reacts to obstacles. When someone sees a failure as proof that they are incapable, they lose motivation. They feel shame or fear and avoid trying again. When someone sees the same event as a piece of information, they stay curious. They look for patterns, make adjustments, and keep going. Edison embodied this second approach. His laboratory was full of half-finished machines, broken parts, and scribbled notes. To an outsider, it might have looked like chaos. To Edison, it was a record of learning. Each failure marked progress towards success. Consider a modern example. A startup launches a new app. The initial version has bugs, and users complain. If the founders see this as a failure, they might feel defeated and abandon the project. If they reframe it as an experiment, they collect user feedback and improve the design. The negative reviews are no longer evidence of incompetence, but clues to what people really want. With each update, the app gets better. Over time, the company builds a successful product. The difference lies not in the circumstances, but in how the problem is framed. Edison's approach also prevented him from being trapped by ego. Many inventors become attached to their first ideas. When those ideas fail, they take it personally. Edison treated his work like a scientist rather than an artist. He did not assume his first solution was correct. If the data proved otherwise, he adjusted without shame. This detachment allowed him to explore many possibilities without becoming defensive. For example, when his early electric power systems faced technical issues, he did not insist they were perfect. He made changes, even replacing entire designs when necessary. His focus was always on the end goal, not on proving himself right. Reframing problems also helps teams work together. In a traditional environment, failure often leads to blame. People hide mistakes to protect themselves. This slows progress and breeds mistrust. Edison's laboratories operated differently. His assistants were encouraged to report problems openly. A failed experiment was simply part of the process. This created a culture of honesty and rapid learning. Modern companies like tech firms and research groups use similar approaches today. They run controlled tests, gather data, and iterate quickly. By treating each setback as feedback, they innovate faster than competitors who fear failure. There is a psychological element to this as well. Humans are naturally loss-averse. We feel the pain of failure more strongly than the pleasure of success. Edison's reframing helped him bypass this tendency. By redefining failure as learning, he reduced its emotional sting. When a test went wrong, he did not experience it as a loss. He experienced it as progress. This kept his mood stable, even during long periods of difficulty. Leaders who adopt this mindset can maintain morale for themselves and their teams. When people see their struggles as part of growth, they stay engaged and resilient. Imagine a teacher introducing this concept to students. A child struggles with a math problem and says, "I'm bad at this." The teacher responds, "You're not bad at it. You're still experimenting with ways to solve it." The child's mindset shifts. Instead of seeing a fixed ability, they see a process. This small change can shape how they approach challenges for the rest of their life. Edison's life offers this lesson on a grand scale. His inventions were the result of thousands of such reframed moments. Edison's reframing also applied to how he viewed competition. Other inventors were racing to create similar technologies. When someone else succeeded first, Edison did not dwell on defeat. He studied their success to understand what worked. Then he used that knowledge to improve his own designs. By seeing competitors as sources of information rather than threats, he stayed focused on learning. This prevented him from being consumed by rivalry or bitterness. In modern business, this same attitude allows companies to adapt quickly to market changes. A failed product launch becomes market research for the next attempt. Reframing problems does not mean ignoring reality. Edison faced real setbacks, including financial losses and public criticism. Some of his ideas never worked, despite years of effort. The key was that he acknowledged these facts without letting them define him. When the first version of his phonograph failed to gain popularity, he did not declare the entire concept worthless. He analyzed why it failed, improved the design, and tried again. This balance of realism and optimism is essential. Blind optimism leads to wasted effort, while realism without hope leads to paralysis. Reframing creates a middle path where problems are seen clearly but not feared. Consider a professional athlete who loses a major competition. If they frame the loss as proof they will never succeed, their career may decline. If they frame it as data about what to improve, they train smarter and return stronger. Edison applied this logic not just to physical skills, but to ideas and machines. Each unsuccessful trial revealed the limits of materials, techniques, or assumptions. By gathering these insights, he built a foundation for breakthroughs. The light bulb was not a single invention, but the result of countless small adjustments informed by past failures. Edison's method also reveals why progress often looks messy from the outside. People prefer neat success stories where a genius has a single brilliant idea. In reality, innovation is a tangled process of trying, failing, and adapting. Edison was open about this. He famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that will work." This quote captures his worldview. Success is not the absence of failure. It is the accumulation of lessons until the right solution emerges. Modern leaders can apply this principle by encouraging experimentation. In a company, this might mean running pilot programs before full launches. In personal life, it might mean viewing career changes as tests rather than irreversible decisions. Each step provides information that guides the next move. Edison's reframing teaches that no effort is wasted if it produces insight. Even in high-stakes situations, reframing can reduce fear. Imagine a doctor developing a new treatment. Each failed trial carries risks and costs. If the doctor sees each failure as a catastrophe, they may become paralyzed. If they see it as part of the process, they stay calm and focused. This perspective allows them to keep moving forward until they find a cure. Edison faced similar pressures with his investors and the public. By staying committed to learning, he maintained trust and momentum. Thomas Edison's legacy is not just his inventions, but his way of thinking. By reframing problems, he turned setbacks into fuel for progress. This mental shift allowed him to persist through challenges that would have stopped others. His life shows that the difference between failure and success often lies not in external events, but in how we choose to see them. Muhammad Ali and Alexander the Great lived in different worlds, yet they shared a common skill that set them apart. Both men understood the power of seeing victory in the mind before it happened in reality. They practiced visualization, a mental technique where a person creates a clear, detailed image of success. This process shapes the way the body and mind respond when the moment of action arrives. Visualization builds confidence, sharpens focus, and aligns behavior with goals. By the time the real event occurs, it feels familiar because it has already been rehearsed in the imagination. Muhammad Ali was not only a great boxer because of his physical talent, he also mastered the mental side of competition. Before a fight, Ali would picture himself in the ring. He imagined a crowd, the sound of the bell, the movements of his opponent, and his own responses. In his mind, he went through every round, every punch, and every victory celebration. This gave him a sense of control. When he stepped into the actual ring, nothing felt new or overwhelming. His mind had been there before. This mental preparation reduced fear and increased confidence. Ali often spoke with certainty about his victories before they happened. To some, it sounded like arrogance. In truth, it was the result of deep visualization. He had already seen himself win so many times that believing it became natural. Alexander the Great used visualization on a larger scale. As a military leader, he faced complex battles that required precise planning and unwavering confidence. Before a campaign, Alexander would study maps and intelligence reports, then picture the battlefield in his mind. He imagined his troops moving across the terrain, the enemy's likely responses, and the final moment of triumph. By rehearsing these scenarios mentally, he could make quicker decisions during real combat. His soldiers followed him not only because of his strategies, but because of his visible certainty. A leader who sees victory clearly inspires others to see it too. Visualization was part of how Alexander projected that certainty. The science behind visualization is straightforward. The brain does not fully distinguish between vivid imagination and real experience. When a person visualizes an action in detail, the same neural pathways activate as when performing the action physically. This creates a form of mental practice. Athletes use this to improve performance. A gymnast who imagines a routine with precision strengthens the same connections as if they were practicing on the mat. When combined with physical training, this mental work creates stronger, more reliable performance under pressure. Ali used this principle instinctively. By visualizing his movements, he trained his mind and body together. Consider a modern example. A speaker prepares for an important presentation. If they simply review their notes, they may still feel nervous when facing the audience. If they visualize the entire experience, the room, the audience's faces, their own voice delivering each point, they create a mental rehearsal. When the actual presentation begins, it feels like a repeat performance rather than a first attempt. This reduces anxiety and increases clarity. The same technique can be applied to negotiations, job interviews, or any high-pressure situation. Visualization makes the unfamiliar familiar. Visualization also strengthens goal alignment. When a person sees a detailed image of success, they are more likely to take actions that lead toward it. This works because the mind becomes focused on a clear target. Ali did not just picture himself winning in general terms. He imagined specific punches, strategies, and outcomes. This guided his training. Each workout became connected to the larger vision. Alexander applied the same principle to his armies. By sharing his vision of conquest with his soldiers, he gave them a sense of purpose. They were not just marching into battle. They were fulfilling a destiny that he had already seen in his mind. There is a psychological benefit as well. Visualization reduces fear by creating familiarity. Many fears come from uncertainty. A person facing a new challenge imagines everything that might go wrong. Visualization shifts this focus. Instead of picturing failure, the mind rehearses success. Ali walked into the ring with calm determination because he had already fought and won in his imagination. Alexander faced overwhelming odds with confidence because he had already mapped out the path to victory in his mind. This mental preparation does not eliminate danger, but it gives the leader a sense of readiness. Visualization can also be used to solve problems creatively. When faced with a complex challenge, the mind can explore solutions through mental simulation. Alexander often faced battlefields where information was incomplete. By visualizing different scenarios, he could test strategies without risking actual lives. Modern business leaders can do the same with decisions. A CEO might visualize how a new product launch will unfold, considering customer reactions, competitor moves, and potential setbacks. This mental rehearsal reveals weaknesses and opportunities before resources are committed. The key to effective visualization is detail. A vague image of success is not enough. Ali did not simply think, "I will win." He pictured specific movements, sounds, and feelings. He imagined his opponent's face, the sweat, the rhythm of his breathing. The more detailed the image, the more powerful the effect. Alexander likely visualized troop formations, weather conditions, and even the morale of his soldiers. These details made his mental rehearsal as close to reality as possible. When the actual event arrived, it felt like stepping into a familiar scene. Visualization also works when combined with affirmations. Ali famously declared, "I am the greatest." These words were not empty boasting. They were a verbal extension of his mental images. By speaking his vision out loud, he reinforced it. Each declaration strengthened his belief and focus. Alexander used symbols and speeches to achieve a similar effect. Before a campaign, he would describe the coming victory to his men as if it were already decided. This created a shared mental picture. When thousands of soldiers hold the same vision, their actions become aligned toward achieving it. There are limits to visualization. It does not replace action. Ali still trained relentlessly. Alexander still gathered intelligence and organized logistics. Visualization is a tool that prepares the mind, but it must be matched with effort. Without action, the mental images remain fantasy. With action, they become blueprints for reality. This balance is crucial. A fighter who only visualizes but never trains will fail. A general who only imagines victory but does not plan will lose. Ali and Alexander succeeded because they combined vision with discipline. Consider a person preparing for a difficult conversation. They are nervous about confronting a colleague or family member. If they simply worry, their mind fills with worst-case scenarios. If they visualize the conversation going well, they shift their focus. They picture themselves speaking calmly, listening carefully, and reaching understanding. When the real moment comes, they are more composed. The visualization has prepared their mind for success. This same principle applies on larger scales, whether in sports, leadership, or war. Visualization also creates resilience. When setbacks occur, the mental image of success provides motivation to continue. Ali lost fights, but his vision of himself as a champion kept him training. Alexander faced defeats and logistical challenges, but his grand vision of conquest kept him moving forward. The mental picture acts as a compass, guiding actions even when the path is difficult. Without it, setbacks can cause discouragement and drift. Ali and Alexander show that victories are often won first in the mind. By visualizing success with vivid detail, they shaped their actions and those of others. Their confidence came not from blind optimism, but from repeated mental rehearsal. When they stepped into the ring or onto the battlefield, they were living out a story they had already seen many times before. This is the power of visualization. It turns goals into clear images, and those images guide decisions, movements, and strategies until the imagined becomes real. Marcus Aurelius lived in a world filled with uncertainty. As Emperor of Rome, he faced constant threats from war, disease, political betrayal, and personal loss. Despite this, his writings show remarkable calm and clarity. One of the techniques he used to maintain this inner strength was negative visualization. This practice, central to Stoic philosophy, involves imagining loss and hardship before they occur. By confronting these possibilities in the mind, a person reduces fear of the unknown and builds gratitude for what they have. It is a way of preparing the mind for reality instead of being shocked or broken by it. Negative visualization does not mean pessimism. Marcus Aurelius did not spend his days expecting disaster or wallowing in worry. Instead, he took time to picture challenges as if they had already happened. He imagined losing power, facing betrayal, or even the death of loved ones. By doing this, he stripped these events of their power to terrify him. When something difficult eventually occurred, it felt familiar rather than overwhelming. This allowed him to respond with reason instead of panic. The goal was not to dwell on suffering, but to train the mind to meet it with courage. The Stoics believed that most fear comes from surprise. When something bad happens unexpectedly, people react with shock. They feel as if the world has betrayed them. Negative visualization removes this element of surprise. If you have already imagined losing your wealth, then a real financial setback feels less catastrophic. If you have pictured illness or aging, you are better prepared when they arrive. Marcus practiced this daily. In his journal, later known as Meditations, he often reminded himself that people would act selfishly, that plans would fail, and that death was always near. By rehearsing these truths, he stayed grounded. Consider a modern example. A person works at a company that is going through restructuring. They fear losing their job, but they try not to think about it. Then, one day, the layoff notice arrives, and they are devastated. The shock makes it difficult to think clearly or plan next steps. Now imagine if in the weeks before, they had practiced negative visualization. They would have pictured themselves being let go, imagined the conversation, and considered what they would do afterward. When the real event happened, it would still be painful, but they would face it with a calm mind and a prepared plan. This is the strength that Marcus Aurelius cultivated as emperor. Negative visualization also builds gratitude. When you imagine losing something, you become more aware of its value while you still have it. Marcus often reflected on the people close to him and considered that they could be gone at any moment. This made him cherish his time with them more deeply. Modern life offers many opportunities for this practice. A parent might picture their child growing up and leaving home. This mental image makes the present moments more precious. A person might imagine life without their health, which helps them appreciate simple abilities like walking or breathing. By regularly visualizing loss, gratitude becomes part of daily life. The technique also helps reduce anger. When someone disappoints us, we often react as if their behavior is shocking and unacceptable. Marcus advised expecting people to act according to their nature. If you imagine in advance that someone will lie, act selfishly, or make mistakes, you are less disturbed when it happens. This does not mean approving of bad behavior. It means meeting it with understanding instead of rage. For example, a manager might practice negative visualization before a difficult meeting. They imagine the other person becoming defensive or angry. When it actually happens, they remain calm because they anticipated it. This mental preparation prevents escalation. Negative visualization can be applied to physical hardship as well. Stoic philosophers often imagined losing comfort and facing poverty or illness. Some even practiced voluntary discomfort to strengthen their resilience. They might sleep on a hard floor for a night or go without food for a day. Marcus, as emperor, did not live in luxury despite his power. He understood that comfort could make a person soft and unprepared. By imagining himself without wealth or status, he kept his identity separate from external things. In modern terms, this might mean imagining how you would cope if you lost your house, your job, or your possessions. By rehearsing this mentally, you reduce the fear that these things define you. There is a psychological explanation for why this works. Fear thrives in uncertainty. When the mind does not know what to expect, it magnifies possibilities, often making them worse than reality. Negative visualization brings these fears into the open. By picturing them clearly, you take away their mystery. It is like shining a light into a dark room. The shapes that seemed terrifying become manageable once you see them fully. Marcus used this to face the constant threats to his rule. Wars, plagues, and conspiracies were part of his daily life. By visualizing them beforehand, he kept his mind steady even when chaos surrounded him. Consider a soldier preparing for battle. If they try to avoid thinking about injury or death, the shock of combat may paralyze them. If they visualize the worst beforehand, they are better able to act when danger comes. Athletes use a similar technique. A climber might imagine falling and how they will respond to recover safely. This does not make the fall less dangerous, but it makes the climber less likely to freeze in fear. Negative visualization is a mental drill for life's challenges. Marcus also used this practice to guide decisions. By imagining worst-case outcomes, he could weigh risks more clearly. If he considered a new policy, he pictured what would happen if it failed completely. If that imagined failure was still bearable, he knew the risk was acceptable. If the consequences were too great, he chose another path. This approach helps modern leaders as well. A business owner considering a new venture can visualize it collapsing. They imagine the financial loss, the public embarrassment, and the recovery process. If they can handle that scenario, they proceed. If not, they adjust their plan. Negative visualization turns vague fears into concrete possibilities that can be measured. The practice also strengthens relationships. Marcus understood that life is fragile and temporary. By imagining the loss of loved ones, he reminded himself to treat them with kindness while they were present. This perspective reduces petty conflicts. A person who visualizes their partner being gone tomorrow is less likely to waste today on trivial arguments. In modern life, this can bring greater appreciation to everyday interactions. Even simple conversations become meaningful when you remember they will not last forever. Some people resist negative visualization because they fear it will make them sad or anxious. The Stoics addressed this concern directly. They taught that the goal is not to dwell on suffering, but to face it calmly. Marcus often wrote about death, but his tone was not gloomy. He saw death as a natural part of life, like the changing of seasons. By visualizing it regularly, he removed its power to terrify him. In the same way, visualizing hardship is not meant to create despair. It is meant to build strength. When the mind has already walked through darkness, it is not overwhelmed when darkness arrives. Imagine a modern executive preparing for a major presentation to investors. They fear rejection and failure. If they avoid these thoughts, the fear grows in the background. If they practice negative visualization, they picture the worst outcome: the investors saying no, the funding disappearing, and the company struggling. They also picture themselves responding calmly, finding alternative solutions, and continuing forward. When the real meeting happens, they are ready for any result. This preparation creates confidence that comes not from hope, but from readiness. Marcus Aurelius showed that peace of mind does not come from controlling the world. It comes from preparing the mind to meet the world as it is. Negative visualization trains people to face loss and hardship with open eyes. By imagining difficulties in advance, they reduce fear, increase gratitude, and respond with reason instead of panic. This ancient Stoic practice remains as useful today as it was in the courts and battlefields of Rome. Julius Caesar and Napoleon Bonaparte understood that defeating a strong enemy often required more than force. They mastered the strategy of divide and conquer, breaking large groups of opponents into smaller, weaker factions. Once divided, those groups could be managed, manipulated, or destroyed more easily. This approach was not just about military tactics. It applied to politics, governance, and even personal rivalries. By keeping their enemies divided, both men maintained dominance over complex and volatile situations. Caesar rose to power in a Rome filled with competing interests. The Senate, powerful families, and rival generals all sought control. Instead of confronting them all at once, Caesar played them against each other. Early in his career, he formed the first triumvirate with Pompey and Crassus, two of the most influential men in Rome. This alliance was temporary by design. It gave Caesar the support he needed to rise while preventing his two rivals from uniting against him. Over time, he carefully widened the cracks between Pompey and Crassus, feeding their mistrust. When Crassus died in battle, Caesar was ready to turn on Pompey, who now stood alone. By dividing his enemies, Caesar faced each challenge separately rather than fighting a united front. This same method worked on the battlefield during his campaigns in Gaul. Caesar faced tribes that, if united, would have overwhelmed his legions. Instead of letting them join forces, he moved quickly to attack individual tribes before they could coordinate. He also used diplomacy to keep some tribes neutral or even allied with Rome while he defeated others. Once one group was subdued, he turned to the next. At no point did he allow his enemies to gather their full strength. The result was a series of victories that seemed impossible if viewed as a single war. Caesar's genius lay in seeing not just the strength of his enemies, but also the fault lines within them. Napoleon applied similar principles on a grander scale. Europe in his time was a patchwork of kingdoms and empires. Many of these nations feared Napoleon's growing power, but they rarely acted as one. Napoleon worked to keep them divided. He made separate peace treaties with some states while fighting others. When coalitions formed against him, he used speed and deception to strike at one member before the others could unite. On the battlefield, he maneuvered his forces to isolate parts of an enemy army, defeating them in detail rather than facing their combined might. This required precise timing and bold movement, but it gave him repeated victories even when outnumbered. For example, during the 1805 campaign that led to the Battle of Austerlitz, Napoleon faced a coalition of Russian and Austrian forces. If these armies had coordinated perfectly, they would have had the advantage. Napoleon deliberately spread false information to make them believe he was weaker than he truly was. This encouraged them to advance separately. When the Austrians moved forward without full Russian support, Napoleon struck quickly, defeating them before the Russians could join. By the time the Russian army arrived, it was too late. The coalition had been divided, and Napoleon controlled the field. His victory at Austerlitz was not just a triumph of force, but of manipulation and timing. Divide and conquer also works in politics and leadership beyond war. A modern leader in business might face a group of competitors threatening their market share. Instead of fighting them all at once, they can form partnerships with some companies while competing aggressively against others. By giving certain rivals incentives to cooperate, they prevent a unified challenge. This mirrors how Caesar kept some tribes friendly while fighting others. The principle remains the same. Fragmentation of opposition creates opportunities for control. In government, a leader can use division to manage internal factions. Imagine a cabinet filled with ambitious ministers. As they all unite, they could challenge the leader's authority. By giving each minister different responsibilities and rewards, the leader creates competition among them. Each minister focuses on advancing their own position rather than forming alliances to overthrow the leader. This was a tactic both Caesar and Napoleon used with their generals. Promotions, honors, and promises of future power were distributed carefully to prevent unity. While the generals competed with each other, the supreme leader remained secure. There is a psychological component to this strategy. Groups often seem powerful from the outside, but within them are differences of opinion, conflicting interests, and personal rivalries. A skilled leader identifies these cracks and widens them. Caesar was a master of this art. When dealing with rival politicians, he spoke to each one's ambitions separately. He promised different rewards to different people, creating a web of obligations that bound them to him, but not to each other. This prevented them from forming a united resistance. Napoleon used similar techniques with foreign leaders. He negotiated separate treaties that gave each nation something unique. By doing so, he ensured that they distrusted one another and could not easily join forces against him. Consider a modern example in a workplace. A manager faces resistance from a group of employees unhappy with new policies. If the group stays united, the manager may be forced to back down. If the manager listens carefully, they may discover that the employees have different priorities. Some care about scheduling, others about pay, and others about recognition. By addressing these concerns individually, the manager can satisfy parts of the group. As their interests diverge, the unified resistance weakens. This is a nonviolent form of divide and conquer. The strategy also applies to communication. When two enemies argue with each other, they have less energy to fight you. Caesar often spread rumors or made public statements designed to sow discord among his opponents. Napoleon did the same through propaganda. By shaping the narrative, they could create confusion and mistrust. In modern politics, this might involve releasing carefully timed information that exposes divisions within an opposing party. The public sees the group fighting itself, which makes it less effective. However, divide and conquer carries risks. If a leader pushes too hard, the factions may recognize the manipulation and unite out of necessity. Caesar faced this danger when he crossed the Rubicon and marched on Rome. At that point, his enemies understood that he aimed for total power. Many previously divided factions joined together to oppose him. Caesar still won, but the conflict was far more difficult because his opponents finally set aside their differences. Napoleon encountered a similar problem late in his career. After years of maneuvering, the European powers eventually formed a massive coalition that learned to cooperate. Once united, they were able to defeat him at last. This shows that division must be maintained carefully and continuously. It is not a one-time act, but an ongoing process. The principle of divide and conquer depends on understanding human nature. People naturally form groups, but those groups are rarely perfectly unified. Differences in belief, ambition, and resources create natural divisions. A skilled leader observes these differences and uses them strategically. Caesar and Napoleon were not only warriors, but also students of psychology and politics. They understood that power is not just about strength. It is about shaping relationships. By keeping enemies focused on each other rather than on you, victory becomes far easier to achieve. This strategy remains relevant today. In negotiations, a skilled diplomat may separate issues into smaller parts, resolving them one at a time instead of facing a single overwhelming dispute. In business, a company may divide its competitors by offering exclusive deals to some partners while isolating others. In personal life, even a family mediator might use divide and conquer by speaking to individuals separately to reduce conflict before bringing everyone together. The context changes, but the underlying idea remains constant. Julius Caesar and Napoleon succeeded because they never faced all their enemies at once. They saw every conflict as a puzzle of moving parts. By dividing those parts, they made each one manageable. Their legacy shows that strength alone is not enough to rule. Strategy, timing, and the ability to manipulate divisions are just as important. Through divide and conquer, they turned vast, united threats into scattered, controllable challenges and secured their place in history. Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller built empires in steel and oil, industries that shaped modern America. Both men were known for their ruthless business tactics, yet they were also famous for their philanthropy. This combination was not a contradiction. Their generosity was strategic. They gave at specific moments, to specific causes, and in specific ways that built loyalty, improved their reputations, and reinforced their power. This is the essence of selective generosity. It is not about giving freely to everyone. It is about using generosity as a tool to achieve larger goals. Carnegie rose from poverty to become one of the wealthiest men in history. He understood that money could buy more than goods. It could buy influence. During his career, he donated to causes that reflected his values, but also served his interests. His most famous effort was funding libraries across the United States and beyond. At first glance, this seems like pure benevolence. Millions benefited from access to books and education. But Carnegie's choice of libraries was deliberate. By promoting self-education, he reinforced the idea that individuals could rise through hard work. just as he had. This narrative supported his belief in capitalism and personal responsibility. It also helped deflect criticism of his labor practices, which were often harsh. When workers struck for better conditions, Carnegie's image as a library builder softened public opinion. His generosity shaped how people saw him, and by extension, his company. Rockefeller took a similar path, but applied even more precision. As the head of Standard Oil, he faced intense scrutiny and legal battles over monopolistic practices. Critics painted him as a greedy tycoon, crushing competition. In response, Rockefeller began giving away vast sums of money. He funded universities, medical research, and public health campaigns. These gifts were highly visible and carefully timed. For instance, during periods when his company faced lawsuits or public anger, Rockefeller announced new donations. This shifted headlines and created goodwill. People who benefited from his foundations saw him not as a villain, but as a benefactor. His selective generosity was a form of reputation management. Both men also used giving to build loyalty within their networks. Carnegie understood that personal gifts could secure the loyalty of powerful allies. He often supported politicians, journalists, and community leaders through donations. These gifts were framed as public-spirited acts, but they also created a sense of obligation. When Carnegie needed political support for a project or favorable coverage in the press, those he had helped were more likely to respond. Rockefeller did the same on a larger scale. By funding institutions, he influenced entire sectors. Universities that relied on his grants were less likely to challenge his business interests. Health organizations funded by his foundation became natural allies. This web of influence extended far beyond direct control of his company. The timing of generosity mattered as much as its amount. A poorly timed gift could seem like a bribe or an attempt to cover up wrongdoing. A well-timed gift could transform public opinion. For example, after a violent clash between striking workers and private security at Carnegie's steel plant in Homestead, Pennsylvania, his reputation suffered. In the years that followed, he increased his philanthropic efforts, especially in education and public works. These projects slowly shifted the narrative. People began to associate his name with progress rather than violence. The same dynamic played out for Rockefeller. When the government broke up Standard Oil, he responded not with anger, but with visible acts of giving. Over time, he became known less as a monopolist and more as a philanthropist. Selective generosity is not limited to billionaires. The same principle appears in everyday leadership. Imagine a manager who gives praise or rewards to employees. If they give equally to everyone, the gesture loses impact. If they never give, morale suffers. But if they choose moments carefully, their generosity carries weight. A well-timed bonus after a difficult project signals appreciation and builds loyalty. A public thank you during a crisis boosts morale at a critical moment. The manager's selective generosity shapes the culture of the team. Carnegie and Rockefeller operated on a global scale, but the underlying psychology was the same. There is also a difference between public and private generosity. Carnegie often made his gifts public, such as the construction of libraries bearing his name. This visibility served his goals by linking his identity to education and progress. Rockefeller, on the other hand, sometimes gave anonymously early in his career. This allowed him to test strategies and build relationships quietly. Later, when public opinion became important, he shifted to more visible philanthropy. Leaders today face the same choice. A private act of generosity may build deep trust with individuals. A public act may influence a wider audience. The most effective strategy often involves both. Selective generosity can also create leverage. When a leader controls resources that others need, their giving becomes a source of power. Rockefeller's funding of medical research is an example. At a time when government support was limited, his foundation became the primary source of money for certain fields. This gave him indirect influence over research priorities. Similarly, Carnegie's library program allowed him to shape communities. Towns competed for his grants by meeting certain conditions, such as providing land and ongoing support. This ensured that his gifts were used according to his vision. The recipients felt grateful, but they also operated within boundaries he set. There is a risk to this strategy. If people perceive generosity as purely self-serving, it can backfire. Some critics saw through Carnegie and Rockefeller's tactics, calling them attempts to buy redemption. The term philanthrocapitalism captures this tension. A gift can inspire gratitude or suspicion depending on how it is framed. Both men worked hard to present their giving as sincere. Carnegie wrote essays explaining his philosophy of wealth, arguing that the rich had a duty to use their fortunes for the public good. Rockefeller spoke about his faith and his desire to improve society. These narratives helped mask the strategic nature of their actions. Without such framing, their generosity might have been rejected as manipulation. Consider a modern parallel. A tech company faces criticism for privacy violations. In response, it launches a high-profile campaign to support digital literacy in schools. The program helps many students, but it also shifts the conversation. Critics now have to acknowledge the company's contributions as well as its missteps. This is selective generosity at work. The gift serves both a public good and a private interest. Whether people accept it depends on timing, transparency, and the perceived motives behind it. Carnegie and Rockefeller's selective generosity extended beyond their lifetimes. They created foundations with long-term influence. These organizations continue to fund research, education, and public health initiatives. Even decades after their deaths, their names remain associated with progress rather than exploitation. This shows the lasting power of well-planned giving. By controlling not only how they earned money, but also how they distributed it, they shaped history. Their philanthropy was not separate from their empires. It was an extension of their strategy, a final stage of dominance achieved through generosity. Selective generosity is ultimately about control. By choosing when, where, and how to give, leaders direct the flow of gratitude and loyalty. Carnegie and Rockefeller mastered this art. Their gifts built libraries and laboratories, cured diseases, and educated generations. At the same time, those gifts protected their legacies and reinforced their power. The act of giving, when done selectively, becomes as strategic as any business decision. It turns wealth into influence and influence into lasting authority.